Okay, good evening. We're going to go ahead and start the workshop to discuss commission meeting procedures and village code. It is 7:21, Wednesday, July 24th. Call to order, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Truppen,
Here.
Vice Mayor Samari,
Here.
Commissioner Johnson Sadella,
Here.
Commissioner Tudor,
Here.
Commissioner Wise.
Stand for the pledge again, please.
Let me know when I should talk about it.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This evening's workshop is on commission meeting procedures and village code. We'll go ahead and, you do not have to have signed in. If you want to go ahead and speak, just go ahead and sign up. We've already read the decorum rules once, so I won't have them read again in efforts of saving time. So if we could start with public comments related to either 5A or 5B, please. Any comments?
On item 5A, Commissioner Tudor's discussion for meeting policies and procedures, I fully endorse the draft that's attached to the agenda as I wrote it myself and tried to bring it to the Commission in March and April of 2018 when I couldn't even get a second to discuss it at Commission meetings. So, Commissioner Tudor, thank you for bringing it back, and I hope you work your way through it. I hope that you adopt most of the things in there because they are already part of our resolutions and our practice, and probably could use a few other items to be included. On item 5B, it's hard not to see this as another wag the dog attempt at obfuscation. The agenda item itself says discussion of amendments to section 2-30 of the Village Code. And it's not until halfway into the memo when you get the idea that this has something to do with boards and committees. So whoever first read the agenda item or saw what's posted at Village Hall, probably even some of the members of your current committees, people sitting on those boards, they probably don't even know what you're attempting to do here tonight, is discuss changes and requirements for those board members that you won't require of yourself. The cases that are attached to the agenda backup, that are cited and attached, they show a clear lack of understanding what the advisory boards do in Biscayne Park. They involve ordinances and the Florida Building Code and laws and things that are just not what our advisory boards deal with. As far as having sunshine training for the boards, I think it's a great idea. Our former clerk used to, every year, once a board was installed in March or in April, organize with the ethics, Miami-Dade County Commission on Ethics, for them to come here and give instruction on sunshine to all board members. And if that's the only thing you're requiring, that's terrific. It already was being done under the prior management. But if what you're requiring is what was attached as a proposed ordinance at the regular meeting earlier this month, that goes way beyond requiring sunshine instruction, and you ought to seriously consider pulling that back. It's not what this community is about. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chuck Ross, 11166 Griffin Boulevard. I think holding this type of workshop on such short notice at a special meeting regarding the boards is improper. I also think that you actually haven't followed procedure because you're supposed to have a discussion and make a resolution to agree upon that you want to bring forth an ordinance even before you do the workshop. And then you do the workshop. Then you have the first hearing. So you're not going according to procedure. The other thing is, it's who authorized to bring this at this meeting tonight. I know that you talked about having the meeting for rules for the commission to meet at the meeting, at your last meeting, but we didn't, I don't believe you talked about bringing this to a workshop. Maybe I missed it. Okay. Stand corrected. And I hope next time my wife comes up and gives you some advice that you'll listen to her. I'm really shocked that this attorney doesn't know these things. I've said this before. I don't think her background suits local government as far as being a local government attorney. You're going to have to make some decisions about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Linda Dillon, 712 115th Street. I've been a member of the Code Board since 2012, and I just want to let everybody know that every year that I have been on that board, we have had ethics training as well as meeting in the sunshine discussion, so it's not something new. And on the Code Board, you have made the suggestion that if we continue having a Code Board, which I understand there's some discussion that you would like to disband it. But that being said, having board members serve one-year terms where we have it clearly on a rotational basis so that there is expertise from year after year rather than having brand-new people every single year. I would like to see, if the board is to continue, that you keep that rotation system.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, can I answer some of the question about ethics training?
Yes.
We did have an ethics training session last year here for the board members around, I think it was October. And yeah, so still the continues. And I remember most of the people that are here, it was on this, attended that session. And I'm dealing with, I'm working with Mr. Thompson from the Ethics Commission to come here and give another session since May. He just doesn't have the time yet. So,
I saw him,
yes,
I saw
I'm
him
working
yesterday, and
with
he's
him.
aware.
Yeah.
He mentioned it to me as well when I saw him yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Ethics training for the board, and
So everybody's.
yeah, he told me we can get confirmation from at least 10 people in the date that works, and 10 board members, whichever board.
Yeah.
Obviously, cross-functional board is fine. If they can be here on a date certain, he will come to us. I don't know if there's been any efforts to
I
get
did.
availability for that, but that's what he told me.
I confirmed with him 25 board members.
Okay.
I'm not sure if everybody's going to be present because, summer, vacation. But yeah, I told him 25 board members.
Well, maybe you two could work this out and make sure we move forward with that. That'd be great. It's a great training. I'm going to go ahead and turn to Commissioner Tudor. This was your item. You have been patiently waiting now, 2 meetings to bring this forth? So we will turn it over to Commissioner Tudor for item 5A.
Yep. Real quick, yeah, this is just an item that I think's been long overdue. I think unfortunately our charter just has very weak language in there that the commission has to set its own procedures. And and prior commissions have been relying on past practices. Well, this is how we've done things in the past. I think we need to get past that. We need to be more of a professional organization. We need to have concrete policies and procedures in place. I know when Commissioner Ross had brought this forward, I believe it was a couple years ago, I was in support of at that time having the discussion. So I think it's something that's greatly overdue. What I've attached in this here is just more for discussion purposes. I attached the prior resolution that Commissioner Ross had provided at the prior meeting. I thought it had some good language in there. Also provided the Miami-Dade County Commission, Miami-Dade County Commission's rules of procedure to kind of, we may be able to piggyback off some of that, take some of the language that's there as well. But I think this should be the first step towards kind of locking down some of the policies and procedures we have, not just for the commission, but I think going forward towards whether it's boards, whether it's, any of the other items that are greatly overdue. But I think what we should do with this is I don't want to see the commission legislate from the dais. I think we should have a discussion on this. I was hoping there'd be more residents here to get some feedback. I know usually residents that are here are usually very vocal, so I kind of was hoping to have some of them here tonight. But I'd like to get some guidance from the commission, turn this over to the administration, let the professionals handle drafting the language, bringing it back to the commission. What I'd like to see is something come back to us in September that we could look at, maybe have further discussion, tweak it. But I think it's definitely long overdue that we finally get these policies, procedures in place, in writing, in black and white, so that it's fair to residents when they want to know how we're conducting our meetings, or what they're allowed or what they're not allowed to do, or what commissioners are allowed or not allowed to do on a dais. We'll have something in black and white that can address that.
Does it just become part of the charter?
Vice Mayor, do you want to be recognized?
It should become part of your code. Here's what your charter says regarding rules and regulations. Actions requiring an ordinance, and it provides a list of nine different ways you would need an ordinance. And one of them is if you establish a rule or regulation, the violation of which would carry a penalty. So if you want these rules and procedures to have some teeth to them with respect to commissioners or residents, my recommendation would be that you codify it, and it's not just a resolution, but you do an actual ordinance and you make it part of your code. That's if you intend on these policies and procedures having potential penalties if they're not followed. Your charter would require that it be part of the code.
Yeah, I had a question about that because when I first became commissioner and mayor, what shocked me was how many things that I see in other cities that are ordained, but in here they're in resolutions. And so if you happen to be in it for a long time, you might remember the resolution. I read through most of them. Some of them I thought were passed, were not, and I made mistakes that way. So my question to you is do you find that a lot of our resolutions should have been ordinances in the first place?
I mean, I don't like to Monday morning quarterback another.
Well, let me rephrase that. Would it be better if some of the resolutions we currently have, if we plan to use them?
There are certain resolutions that this village has that I would like to see part of your code because, for a few reasons. One, I think they probably should be part of your code because they're good ideas and they should be codified. And two, because resolutions can be undone very easily. Ordinances, not so much. Ordinances can only be undone by other ordinances, which means advertisements, 2 hearings. So, and this can be part of the review. I know this is just a brainstorming session, but if there are resolutions that the commission really likes and thinks this should be part of our code, this shouldn't just be a resolution, let's talk about codifying them in this process if they're good. Like there was a resolution that came up at the last meeting that's a good resolution,
yep,
but it's not part of the code. I mean, you may want to consider making it part of the code. It falls in line with establishing commission meeting procedures. So I recommend that be part of the review as well.
Yeah, I think one thing that's kind of going off what the attorney was speaking there, resolutions to me are always a nice little, recommendation. This is something we like. I think we got to get away from that. It needs to have teeth. It needs to be concrete. I would like to see future commissions when they're sworn in actually annually reviewing the policies and procedures to ensure that that they're still meeting their intended purposes. We've got to get away from running our form of government as, and no offense to HOAs, but running our board, our commission as HOA. We need to have, like I said, concrete rules, and it needs to have, and the reason why it needs to be, there needs to be some understanding of a way to direct or curtail bad behavior that takes place on both sides of the case. And right now, there's nothing that we can really point to. We need to have things in place. I know at prior commission meetings, some residents were up in arms about having a sergeant at arms sitting at the end of the dais. Well, you know what? That should be laid out. That should be in there in black and white, so there is no question. A resident and a commissioner should understand how a meeting's going to run, how it should be conducted, what they can and cannot do. And so I think, addressing this now, it should have been done years ago, but addressing it now, I think that will help to alleviate some of the disconnect and some of the angst that some of the residents are feeling.
Thanks. With these, I like to see it be put into an ordinance, but I like to see it be put separate ordinances.
Like
Meaning,
a different section?
I'll give you an example. Mine's that I'm going to bring up, and I spoke to Commissioner Tudor about it in reference to the procedure of canceling in a commission meeting. When we first brought this up, I think I did have consensus from the commission on it. That can be one ordinance right there, and then that can be voted upon. And because I think you told me, or one of the attorneys told me, that an ordinance has to be approved by the residents on a vote. Am I correct?
No, the charter amendments have to go to the
Okay,
ballot.
but this would be considered, if we want to change procedures and stuff, that would be a charter.
No, that can be part of your code, which you want because that's easier. If you amend your charter, that you have to wait for an election.
Right.
But with the code, you can amend the code by ordinance, which is 2 reads. So you want it to be part of your code because you have more access to evolving it as the village's needs change. Whereas with charter is like, it's like the constitution of your municipality, and you have to wait for an election to change it.
But as an ordinance would be considered part of our constitution, or it can be changed at any time?
The ordinance would go part to your code.
And be the law of the land,
Yeah.
so to speak. So, I mean, it has the teeth. Now, there's things, which at the next commission meeting, one of my items is going to be discussion about charter amendments, so I mean, I think that's going to that discussion as well. I think there's a couple things, but that should, as the ordinance, should give it the teeth that it
Okay,
needs.
but the ordinance would outdo the charter?
No, they go
They
together.
would both be together, right?
Commissioner, the idea behind, I'm sorry if I stand.
No.
The idea behind this is that the charter it's solid, it's concrete, okay? That it has to go before or on the ballot to change that.
Right.
So that sets down the broad strokes. With ordinances, we can fine tune, we can get into more detail like this ordinance does on exactly what we need. But it also makes it easier so that, in 10 years, some of the things that we put into ordinances now may not be relevant. So that commission will just have to do a new ordinance to update.
So, yeah, but
Think of the code as a living, breathing thing, and the charter as concrete.
so this would all be put into one ordinance, or would it be broken up?
It would probably go into one ordinance unless it gets so detailed that, it needs to.
What happens if some commissioners don't agree with that part, some parts of the ordinance? Wouldn't it be easier just to be breaking it up and pass the ones that we know for sure that we can pass?
No, really. I mean, it would just be a matter of rewriting the ordinance, taking out the section they disagree with, and approving that.
Anybody on this side? Because I'm looking left and...
No, I agree with needing it to be an ordinance. I agree with that completely.
Can you use the mic if you don't mind? Thank you.
My apologies. I'm in agreement with it being an ordinance, so that it has teeth.
Yeah, and I'd like to see it be very specific so that it's clear. I think part of the problem we have in a lot of our things, some of them are in resolutions, some of them in ordinances, some of them are totally silent, and there's nobody's opining on them. And I think we should also not reinvent the wheel. I think, and I like the fact that you put Miami-Dade counties in here, because they have enough attorneys to go through this many different ways. And I think the only thing I would be cautious about from some of the Miami-Dade stuff is not making it so restrictive and so difficult that it wouldn't fit a smaller municipality. So I would hope that all the staff, when they work on it, would make sure that it's appropriate for a community of our size. But I think most of the things, or a lot of things that are in here, are pretty basic lay of the law things, and I think they would be very helpful. The other thing that's not in here that I would also like to see us address is how things are put on the agenda. It's handled different ways in different cities, but I would like to see how agenda items are put on. I know we have a resolution, but we don't have, like we had ordinance that didn't pass, we had a resolution that did, and this 8-day thing isn't working. Because that's why you're always behind the 8 ball on the 8-day. I'd like to see that increased to at least 10. Yeah, because that's not giving the staff enough time and the attorneys enough time to really look at stuff. So I think I would like to see another part of this be how agenda items are put on, how that is done, so that there are rules to it, so everybody's clear and we're not guessing.
And the time frame of when it's published for residents, because that...
Right, but in order to do that, we have to push back our time frame to make sure that we're getting it in the right time, because the 8-day window is not working.
Well, yeah, with us, we got 30 days before the next commission meeting, so I look at it as maybe there's no reason, there's no reason why we can't move the dates out, because we got 30 days. I mean, there's no excuse on why we can't get
There's a couple instances where there can be a little bit of leeway, so that if something important comes up and the manager needs to get it on, and it's more about what we give to staff than it is what staff does.
Right.
But I do think there's the other side of that. When staff gives stuff to us, I don't want to be reading a big, long thing the day before and not be able to have a conversation with staff about it. So in the same regard, I'd like to see staff also move that time back for the commissioners to review it, to give you feedback, so that we're not making mistakes in the public and having to pick it up during a meeting.
Agreed.
And I think that is a problem that we've been having.
And I also like to, like I said, to have where the residents get enough time to see it. I think that's the biggest problem we've been having, is the residents say that they don't see it in enough time.
Yeah, and I don't disagree. I think we need to be, all in all, our timing and our tightness has to get better, and I think we can do that if we push it back.
Yes.
But we can't expect staff to also jump through hoops if we're doing it last minute, and I've been guilty of it. I'm sure other commissioners have, but we're trying to get stuff in, and we're part-time folks, and we're doing the best we can to get it into you, but I think at some point we're just going to have a cutoff date, stick to that cutoff date, and that's it, unless it's something that is so pressing that requires an override.
Yeah, and I think when I brought this up, I want all the commissioners and the residents understand, this is looking at the broad meeting procedures. I don't want people thinking, oh, okay, this is just going to address decorum. No, I think it should get to the point where we always point to Robert's rules, but I would like to see us actually have some language in there identifying how motions are to be presented. I think the way we currently do it, to where an item may come up and we'll discuss it for 30 or 40 minutes, and the item may be going nowhere. I'm a much bigger supporter of following the more standard rules of when an item is introduced, a motion being made on that item, and then if there's a second, then opening the floor up for discussion. So I think we need to get into discussing things like that. Videotaping of meetings is becoming more prevalent. If you look at towards the back of the supporting documents, backup attachments, there's an ordinance here from the city of Montclair, and they have some good language in there where, something to look at. It addresses guidelines for recording meetings. When they talk about decorum, they actually have a section here regarding decorum in relation to members of the legislative body. And they have a section about decorum related to those residents who are coming up to speak before the commission. So I think, this is not going to be a quick one and done, and that's why I don't want to see us kind of, ideally I'd like to see us come to some agreement on some of the issues that we want to see put into an ordinance, get some general idea of what we're looking for, and then have the professionals come back. One of the things is we need to have language in there about identifying a sergeant of arms and what their role is and what their duties and responsibilities are. As a forward nothing's worse than being put in a position you don't know the rules of engagement. So
Protects everybody.
it protects everybody. It allows residents to understand that line that they can't cross, and it allows sergeant of arms will understand exactly what his role is and what he can and cannot do. So,
And I know the chief will support you on that as well.
and I'm sure the chief would agree with
Yeah.
with that. Absolutely. But yeah, that's really, these really have to cover a lot of bases here. Once we get done with this, I'd like to see us get this put to bed and then start tackling some of the other issues that we may have, ordinances that, may need to be made, discussions regarding charter amendments. But I think this should include things such as meeting procedures, such as what to do when there's not a quorum, how specifically to address that.
Right.
How, because I know that was a big brouhaha for quite a while. Well, let's have something in black and white that,
Absolutely.
This is what's going to happen. If you're available, come in here and there's only one person, then at least it's on the record.
There also should be stuff on meetings if there's a reason for a cancellation that is not a quorum issue. That's also covered in other statutes. Or if there's a reason why a meeting has to be canceled, and it's a legal one or some other reason, that should also be included. So I think you're absolutely correct on this. Vice Mayor.
The good part about putting this on an ordinance, there is no rush to be done. Stuff that he's brought today I think is good, and I like for us to really take our time, since there is no time frame on when this has to be done, that we really take our time and really look at it and, as they say, get it right this time for future things, to where the residents are held accountable and so is the commission to be held accountable, and where we have guidelines that tells us exactly what the rules are. So since there is no time limit, I like for us to take our time doing this and get it as an ordinance and do it that way. That's why it doesn't, because my biggest concern was that we had to have it for, the next coming election and his deadlines. This way, by putting it into an ordinance, we don't have to worry about that. As long as it's our law, it becomes our law. And I also like to see us adopt some stuff of Robert's Rule of Law. I mean, since I became a commissioner, I've been looking at Robert's Rules of Laws, and I know the commission doesn't.
Well, we do,
but I think we
not
should
totally.
start looking at Robert's Rules of Laws and see what this, and adopt some of their things. I'm not saying adopt every single thing, but I've been told that's what we live by, Robert's Rules of Law.
Under your general policies,
I'm sorry, could you put the mic again?
thank you. Under your general policies in your code, you do reference Robert's rules.
Right.
But are you saying you want to adopt like whole sections of Robert's rules that are good practice, so it's codified and
Yes.
clear?
Yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
got
Yeah,
it.
that's what I want, yeah.
Commissioner Weiss?
Yes, I'm sorry. I think that this is really important work, and I would really love it if we, with all due respect, could stop talking about doing the work and discussing this and actually move into the content of this meeting. And would love it if Commissioner Tudor would walk us through the, if it's top to bottom, then top to bottom across the ordinance, so that we can review every section of it, or if Commissioner Tudor, you've identified certain, hot areas, if you will, that demand our attention. I'd had an opportunity to read both of these, but not lay them side by side in red line, so that I could see the differences between, then and what you're proposing now. But I would love to actually do work instead of talking about doing work, with all due respect to everyone on the dais.
Commissioner Johnson Sardella?
No, I don't have an issue with going right into it. I guess I would look to my fellow Commissioner Tudor to let us know kind of how he wants to go through it. Whether or not look at the ordinance that was brought up by former Commissioner Ross and going through and maybe discussing bold points, or starting from the Miami-Dade. I guess I would look for your suggestion of how you think we should.
And I'd like to make one thought, is maybe we could talk about general categories first and then go through it, because I know that's what the construction ordinance, we went back and forth. I started with the too many details. That didn't work. I came back. I come up with the top 10. So maybe we could come up with a top 10 list of things you want, and or things everybody wants, and we can all agree on it. Then have the attorney look at language that would be appropriate and appropriate for our size, and go from there. But I think that's at least starting at a part we could all agree on. Because I think if we go through somebody else's ordinance, we're doing the same thing we asked not to do, which is legislate from the dais. I would rather us take the general categories of what we want and allow the experts to figure out those specifics. That's my thought.
Madam Mayor, I think I agree with that, and if what I said was misunderstood, I don't mean going through each of the topics in the ordinance and like coming up with the language. I mean using those topics in the ordinance to guide our discussion. So each heading, rather than the 5 of us trying to figure out what our top 10 is, I think if we go through, it'll just give us guidance. Like, for example, I'm looking at Article 1 of the Miami-Dade County, and if it starts with, the governing rules, chairperson, we just look at the headings, I think, for just jump
So do you want to
offs
use
for
Miami-Dade as a
conversation.
starting point? Because I think that's probably the
I
most thorough.
wanna-
I would use, I included a resolution that was presented a few years back, because I think it was good for reference sake to point out where some items are in resolutions previously or past practice. But I think using the Miami-Dade County Commission's procedures and identifying taking a look at some of these headings and identifying, what should be applicable to us, which ones do we want to tackle. We definitely shouldn't get into the crafting of the language, because we did, as you said, with the construction, it kind of can get very buried down. And I want to make sure that we identify the key topics that we want to see addressed, so that when an ordinance is drafted and brought back to us, the language in there should, give us the legal coverage and make sure that it's, But I definitely think if we want to use the Miami-Dade County Commission's rules of procedures, I think that would probably be the best launch point.
Okay, we have 51 pages, so I'll let you start. Go for it. Okay, so Commissioner Tudor, so we start with, you want to start with A102 Citizens Bill of Rights, which we have?
Yeah. I mean,
Do we agree we should have a Citizen Bill of Rights, and then
Yes.
they can craft it?
I wouldn't touch that at all.
Okay. Agreed?
Yes.
Okay. Is there consensus, everybody? Yes. Okay. There's a whole section on resolution and ordinances that talks about, Commissioner Tudor, why don't I turn this over to you? So I'm not doing this. Go ahead. You do it. So page 1 of 2.
Sorry, just to confirm, because I'm taking notes, the Citizens Bill of Rights, when you say it's good, you're talking about the villages, or you're
Village.
saying, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, that wasn't anything I was thinking about even touching.
Okay. And if there's
was
something that you, as an attorney, if there's something you come back that you see that we don't see,
Yeah, I have
that's
a few
why.
notes. When we get there, since we're
Okay.
going in order, when we get there, I'll...
Okay.
Yeah.
Commissioner Tudor, I'm sorry, section 1.02, resolution and ordinances?
No. So going in here, I'm on page, I'm just going to start, on the first topic is page 4 discusses about the officers' roles, and we have chairperson, vice chairperson. We don't really have those titles here. I don't know if we want to have any type of language that actually more clearly identifies, which we have language now.
In our charter.
But if we want to add any additional language to clearly identify what the roles of the mayor and vice mayor would be. I don't know if there's really a need to do that.
I don't personally, having been the mayor for now 2.5 years, I will tell you that the roles that are in there are not well defined, and clearly probably could use a little help, because that's really not, there's so much more that you do that you don't expect.
Yeah,
That is really, that most people don't know that you do.
Yeah.
Because that's not in there, and I think that would be, I'd like to see that beefed up a bit.
Yeah, that could be more clearly defined, and I think it's important, whether it's, because I know we have language regarding board members about what can be done if a board member steps out of line. I even think that we need to have language in there for commission roles. And
We have to be careful because of statute, but I don't disagree with you. We have to be very careful with that.
Like if a commissioner, in any capacity, what kind of language could we craft to identify behavior that needs to be reined in, or how we could rein it in?
Okay, so since every member of this commission is elected, you can't go so far as removing a commission. Even with a supermajority vote, the commission as a body does not have that power, period. But you could put something in place in your code with respect to procedures for meetings to censure the conduct of a commissioner by a majority vote. Or for something like that, I would recommend a supermajority vote.
Yeah.
Just so it shows that there's a consensus that something wasn't done correctly or properly, and that it was unanimous with respect to the other members of the commission. One macro level thing I want everyone to keep in mind with respect to Miami-Dade County's sample, which is great. It's a great roadmap to make sure we're not missing anything. Miami-Dade County's government structure is different from the villages. They have a strong mayor form of government. You guys have, the village has a manager commission form of government. So we're going to get to certain things that are not really applicable. Well, if that's the case, I'll let you know, but just keep that in mind, big picture. There's going to be some things about the mayor in here that's not going to apply to the village just because of the way your charter's written.
Yeah, I just think it would be important to have, in the procedures, some type of language to where, and I agree with the supermajority, to where, because having lived here for, 15 years now, I've seen some interesting discussions and things that have happened between commissioners. So I would like to see the commission have a way to kind of police themselves. And if somebody gets out of line, having something in place to where, okay, if the commission needs to censor, this is what can be done. And this is what it would require. So I personally think that's an important thing to have. I think it should put that little light on in the back of somebody's mind when they're up here to be like, okay, let me make sure that I'm the best example of what this village is, and everybody should be looking at us as that's how I should be conducting myself. So so I think having that in there, because I'm just thinking I'm not going to be on the commission forever, so when I'm sitting out there, I want to know there's something in place that's going to basically allow the commission to police itself. So I think having that type of language, and it's not uncommon to see language like that.
No, it's not.
No, I agree. Concur?
Yes.
Agree? Yep. Agree? Yep. Do you have everybody in agreement?
Okay.
The other thing I was asking that I would like to see, and I don't know if you had thought about this, one of the challenges we've had, I've been here for way too long, living in the village, is the ability to stop with the politicking, because we change every 2 years, and I know that's more of a charter situation. But I would like us to make sure the purpose of a meeting is to have village business accomplished. It isn't a gripe session. It's become that a lot, but I would like to see that move away from it. Many other cities don't have the rancor and a lot of the lack of business occurring. What should be a 1-hour meeting, assuming there isn't a staff mistake in this case, but assuming there's a normal meeting process, it shouldn't take 5 hours for what should take a 2.5-hour meeting. I've heard many attorneys complain about it. I've heard staff complain about it. I've heard commissioners complain about it. In order to do that, I'd like to see something in place where items that are being put on the agenda are village business related and not politically related. And that doesn't mean there can't be an issue coming up where somebody wants to bring up an issue with a commissioner or sunshine violation or whatever that is. But I would like to see that we're focusing on business, because that is the reason we're here. And unfortunately, we spend oftentimes, 30% or a large substantial portion of our time not addressing village business. And I'd like to find a way to do that.
I would suggest, or if this is something that would be possible, I understand that on the agenda you're going to have your action items. If the village business, maybe it's just the placement on the agenda so that we get through things that are strictly village business, and then the other items that you're talking about are a little bit further down. But at least, because what I hear is like residents that can't sit all night to hear the important items that they want heard or they want to participate in, even if they're here for the beginning and they're able to make their public comments, then it winds up where it's all the way down the agenda. The meeting is going on because of discussion on other items, and that resident, can't make dinner, can't spend time with their family because they're here all night waiting for a particular item. So maybe we can talk about adjusting where things fall on the agenda so that things that are purely village business are done first.
And I'd like to see the comments, the public comments as well, be put in front for agenda items. Let me just, if I may, because, we can spend hours on public comments, and then it ends up shifting us away from the village business. So if we had public comments that are agenda specific in the beginning, and then general good and welfare at the end, some cities don't even have general good and welfare. But I personally think that's a bad idea. We're a small city, and I think that's okay. But I don't see any reason why we can't have 2 bites at the apple, but general comments in the end. And that would force the most important aspect of it. And because there's a fiscal side of this. There's a cost associated with us allowing this to continue. 5-hour meetings when we should be having 3-hour meetings or 2.5-hour meetings.
My thought on the public comments is that if they're already regulated to a certain time period, if we're saying, okay, public comments are 3 minutes, then to me, in my mind, it doesn't matter where it is. It's 3 minutes is 3 minutes. And the amount of residents that are going to stand up and speak, that's the time, regardless of whether we put it in the beginning, middle, or the end.
May I volley with you? If let's say there are 20 people who want to speak, 10 of them are on items that we are going to be acting on the agenda, and 10 of them are on other matters, good and welfare, not relative to what we're acting on, then we have half an hour delay in getting to the village business because we need to hear the comments that do not pertain to action items. I'm in support of hearing public comment on things that we are going to act on so we get to business.
Yeah.
And anyone who wants to speak on another matter, I don't know if we want to call it good and welfare, whatever it is, it's not the things that we're acting on the agenda. It's not the actual business that we're conducting that day. That should come later in the meeting to ensure that we are doing the business of the village and that the residents are getting what they're paying for from their local government. At this point, this meeting, this is something that is very important to the residents. How many times was this delayed for matters that we were not ever going to act on? I think at least 2 meetings, possibly 3. So, even though it seems like it's limited by time, it's times however many people want to speak.
Then the only thing that I would address there is because the same way things shift off of our agenda, my worry is that then those comments for residents and good welfare, or whatever we want to title it, where does it land so that we then don't undermine those other set of public comments and somehow that falls off the agenda? Because you get what I mean? Because if we say, okay, we're going to have those, in your example, the 10 residents that are coming up to speak about agenda items, that's 30 minutes, now we're moving on to our business. Let's say for some reason our business also...
But that's the point. But that's the whole point. If our business can't get taken care of, then we're looking at things that can be done through emails and other means of communication. We're living in the 21st century here. We have emails. If they have issues, they can email the manager, they can call. There's other ways for residents to communicate, and it's not that I'm trying to stop public comments. I'm trying to make sure and ensure we're getting done village business.
But the problem is that commissioners are not responding to emails. That's the problem we're having. If a resident comes to this commission meeting, they should be able to talk about what they want, within reason. But to say that it's going to be just agenda items is just...
No, and that's not what I'm saying. But if you start at 7 o'clock at night and you're done by 11, and let's say we have a light agenda, it won't be a problem. Most of the time it's not a problem, but when we have packed agendas, and that's another issue, we have to make sure that we're having agendas that we can get through.
The public comments is not causing us to finish these meetings until 11 o'clock.
We had 12 minutes last meeting, and I don't want to go backwards.
12 minutes.
Yes.
Can I give an alternative, since this is a brainstorming session? Like the way City of Miami does it is they break up public comment into different chunks of the meeting. So for example, if there are public hearings, they'll call up public comment for all the public hearings on the agenda. Then they'll do the public hearings. Then after that, the public hearings are closed. And then, okay, we have 2 ordinances for first read. Anyone who wants to do public comment for the ordinances, please come up. And they go like that. And time permitting, at the end, if there's anything that was on the agenda that if they want to make a comment about something that has nothing to do with the agenda, once they've concluded their business, they say to any other general public comments, please come up. But they break it up based on the type of item. And similarly, the agenda is organized based on the types of items, which we currently do. But it's not this like omnibus public comment period at the beginning, because it's kicking all what's happening here, because it's true, you're not getting through your business once a month. You're not. So consider breaking it up based on type as you go through it, or alternatively, you guys need to have more than one meeting a month.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
since the clerk knows, public comments, when they start, how much minutes does it take up from the public comments until they finish the public comments? Time frame.
I don't know, unless...
Can you estimate,
Depends on how many people at 3 minutes a pop.
Yeah, what I'm trying to say is that to say that the public comments is causing us not to finish our business, that's wrong.
No, and I think there's in the time I've been here on the dais, during the general welfare, people get up. I would like to keep general comments at the beginning of a meeting, because most people know the meeting starts at 7. I can go there at 7 o'clock. I'm going to speak on it. Let me just finish it. I'm going to speak on this issue. If you put it like, okay, well, when we finish everything else, then we'll do general comments. Now the person's got to guess, well, what time can I come in here to make a comment?
We
about
could
it?
do a time certain. That's another alternative,
but-
just to ensure we get through the first part of the business.
But
I'm
I'd be
just
more
very...
happy
Go ahead.
putting general comments, keeping them all at the beginning of the meeting, or doing it the other way of maybe I would do general comments at the beginning, allow a resident to come in, state what they need to state, and if they want to leave, and then if people want to speak towards specific items, then maybe have an addition, but just,
Yeah.
and then, so all you're going to have is general comments at the very beginning. If somebody wants to talk about an agenda item, well, you're going to have to wait till public comments for that item.
Agree.
Whether it's an ordinance, resolution, or whatever, you can discuss at that time. I personally think just leave it at the beginning, because what's keeping meetings going till 11 o'clock at night, it's not necessarily resident comments, it's also the way we actually conduct our business of how we discuss and address items that are on the agenda. Because we'll talk for 30 minutes on an item,
And then do nothing
and then
with it.
somebody make a motion and there's no second. That's happened more than a handful of times, and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, why did we just spend 30 or 40 minutes talking about this when there was no appetite from anybody on the dais? And I know some people want to get up here and talk. I'm not up here just to talk. But you know what? Let me make my motion. If no one else wants to second my motion, okay, then it dies. There's no second. Okay, let's go to the next item. I'm fine with that. And I think that's one of the key things I think that really bogs down the meeting. But I know Mr. Ross was raising his hand, so I
Can I?
No,
before
please
Mr.
go up to
Ross,
the
can I
stand.
Can I just address two
Okay, wait.
things before?
Go ahead.
Because it's been coming up, and I just, you can't do, if you're going to keep general public comment at the beginning, you cannot do a cutoff time. You can't, because you have to allow any resident who wants to speak on an action item to speak before you take action on that item. So if you're keeping it as general at the beginning, you cannot issue a cutoff time, because the risk of that is there's residents who came here to speak on an action item before the commission that didn't get to address the commission. So you can't do a
It
cutoff.
violates the statute.
Yeah, 100%. You can't do that. That's number one. Number two, something that hasn't been addressed yet is the commission is losing a substantial amount of time in your regular commission meetings dealing with quasi-judicial proceedings.
yes.
That needs to be separate meetings.
I think you guys should explore making that a special meeting, maybe not every month, because sometimes you don't have any quasi-judicial proceedings, but tacking it onto your already packed agenda for a regular meeting, you guys only meet once a month, it's killing you guys getting through the business.
We also have public, in statute, and I don't know how other cities deal with this, but usually it's second reading where people go on ordinances. And we have one first and second reading. We allow public comments on both. And that also, so between the last meeting, for example, we had 2 public hearings, or 3 public hearings, and general comments, and most people got up and spoke about the same things, 3 minutes each, and we were at 12 minutes a person. And that is why the meeting went so long. And that's on us for not creating a meeting where public hearings are on a separate date. And I think that's part of the other problem.
Can I say a word?
Yeah.
Thank you. Will actually hit on it for the most part, is that the way you're running your meetings, it's not the public comment. It's the meetings aren't run tight. And possibly what you might want to consider is limiting your discussion, the commissioners yourself, to a certain time frame. Because what happens is you tend to go around, and as Will made a good point, if an item doesn't have any support, you make a motion, see if there's a second. If there's no second, move on. So that's something that we might want to look to yourselves first before you look to the public, because it's not the public that's causing the problem.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And by the way, if you wait till the end, the way the meeting's been run, you'll never hear the rest of the public comments because we haven't been able to finish a meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I agree with what you're saying on the motion. It should be a motion, a second, and if there's no appetite, done. But usually, if there's no motion and no second, some people want to hear. Part of what we've always done is we want to hear about it first before we make a motion and a second, because we want to understand what the item's on.
Well, that's why we get the packet ahead of time to review.
But some of the way people write makes it insufficient to deal with
But it's
that.
the way we've done it in the past, and it's not working. That's just my bit.
I hear what you're saying, but it's our responsibility as commissioners to be able to write an agenda item and present it in a manner in which the public can understand it. Otherwise, why are we presenting an agenda ahead of time for the public to be able to see? They should be able to read our agenda items and on their face have an understanding of what's going to be discussed so that they can make their public comments. It shouldn't have to be where we have to flesh it out and discuss it and then make a motion later and then it dies anyway. So I agree with that as to just kind of hitting and running, make the motion, is there a second? Okay, now it's an item to discuss. And then if it's going to be voted on, make a motion to vote on whatever has been.
So make a motion, basically make a motion before any item, if there's, to discuss it, is there a motion to discuss this item? If there's no second, it dies, no discussion, move on to the next item.
Like, for example, let's say item 12A, Commissioner Tudor had an item in there for LED lights at the log cabin. Okay, Commissioner Tudor's item, okay, I make a motion that we approve LED lights at the log cabin. If somebody wants to second it, then okay. Now the item's open for discussion. Everybody gets an initial, everybody talks once, and maybe the person presenting has the final
so
input.
a 3 minute per person, and last person gets 1 minute bite at the end.
Yeah, because sometimes it goes back and forth,
right.
and because I've talked on some items 2 or 3 times, 2 or 3 different times, and I'm fine if y'all want to put a little buzzer on me, so at 3 minutes you zap me or something like that, and I stop. But I think that will, it'll really help streamline the meetings, because I think streamlining the meetings, I think we're going to see that time start.
So why don't we try that? It's not in an ordinance, but why don't we at least try it in our next meeting?
Okay. Here's the problem.
See what works?
Here's the problem I'm having with that. I put an ordinance in and you look at it way ahead of time and you decide you don't want to, as a commissioner, to give me a second to discuss on it, then you come and say, well, there's no second, so I get no discussion on it.
But that's the whole point.
No, but I should be able to defend my item and present my item.
No.
Yes, I do.
And it's actually a common practice.
I know before this election, before...
One at a time, I don't...
Sorry.
Before this election, when people were running, they decided to stop one individual from running. The best way to stop him was not to give him a second. That would kill his agenda item. I don't want to see that happen here. If a commissioner puts an agenda item on it, he should be able to have a second, at least be able to present his case to the commission and to the public, and then you decide you don't want it, but you don't. You just said if you're going to, if you don't want to...
You do, and when it reaches that point in the agenda, the floor goes to you. We can determine, maybe you have 3 minutes to present / defend your item, however you care to characterize it, and once you have completed that opening statement, if you will, there is a motion for discussion, and if there is no second, then that agenda item dies.
I'd like to remind the commission that you guys already have the power to remove items during agenda approval. So this is all, the way it should go is if the commission has approved the agenda, there's a consensus that that item has a chance and there's going to be some sort of discussion on it. So in the scenario Vice Mayor Samari is talking about, where he wants to present an item and nobody's seconding it, you guys should kind of give a tip each other off about that during agenda approval to avoid that dance. As a courtesy, because it would waste time to approve the agenda, let the commissioner think it's going forward, and then when their item comes up, crickets.
Well, I have no problem with the person who's sponsoring the item, they have their initial, they can initially, before they say, because they're not going to get them to say, okay, my initial, motion is, I make a motion, boom, to present their item, present their best case within a allotted time frame, then make a motion, because, I may go ahead and approve the balance of the agenda and say, okay, yeah, no, agenda's fine, let's move forward, but, once I hear whatever commissioner's summary of their item and they make that motion, that has been sometimes at the point where I'm like, you know what, yeah, I want to hear further on this, I'm going to second it.
That's not persuasive.
Or, yeah, no, I don't think that's, that's proper.
So you have basically two, I just want to be clear, so we have two spots in the agenda to remove an item. The first is prior to approving that item. So let's say I bring up an item that says I want a new snake display permanently inside the rec center, and there's no appetite to I'm picking something horrible. Scorpions, I don't care, in the rec center. And you all think I've lost my mind, and so before the agenda, rather than waste my time on it, Commissioner Tudor may say, I'd like to remove item, whatever the number is, which was Mayor Trutman's item on snakes and scorpions from the agenda, because I don't think there's an appetite for that. There could be a second at that point, and then you'd have to vote to have it removed, correct?
You're referring to during agenda approval.
During agenda approval.
Right. I mean, the commission is supposed to approve their agenda, make withdrawals, additions, deletions.
So
at the outset of the meeting before you dive into it. And another thing you guys might want to consider is when the item comes up, let's say you get past agenda approval and you're on the item for discussion, you're in the sunshine at that point. Someone could co-sponsor it to show their support at the outset, and maybe that could streamline things, because then you already know you have two votes. If it's some slam dunk thing that there's a consensus on that maybe wasn't put on the consent agenda for some reason, you could add a co-sponsor procedure in your rules. It might help streamline.
could you explain that a little bit more? So
Okay, so let's say there's an item that was on the agenda, the commission approved it, you get to that part of the agenda, it wasn't put on the consent agenda for whatever reason, maybe you didn't know there was the consensus, so it was on the regular part of the agenda. When you get to it, everybody loves it, but nobody knows that, because that would be a sunshine law violation, right? So you get to the agenda item, let's say snake, let's stick with the snakes.
sorry, I just picked something horrible.
And you say, okay, this is proposed resolution, boom, 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 regarding snakes, the Indiana Jones resolution, whatever.
Nice.
And then Vice Mayor Samaria says, oh, I love snakes. I co-sponsor, before we dive into that, I co-sponsor this resolution. And then, so everyone else on the commission hears, oh, two people are already for it. Okay, what are we really going to talk about? Do we really need to have a 30-minute discussion on this? Someone might say, okay, there's already two. I make a motion to just approve it.
You're talking about at the beginning when we're approving the agenda.
No, when you're at the item.
Oh, I checked, yeah.
So you can't
So
move
you're
it.
kind of
You can't
converting
move
it
it.
to consent.
You can't move it to consent, but you're converting it to or at least getting an indication that there's support for the item.
Yeah, it might help streamline things.
Yeah,
Food for thought. Just
I think it's a good idea. actually.
co-sponsoring is done in other jurisdictions.
But Commissioner Tudor, I do like the suggestion that, you have an opening statement. If you make it past agenda approval, that you have an opening statement for your item that is constrained in time. I think it will force all of us to think very hard about the most persuasive position for the recommendation that we're going to make, as opposed to going on and on for 10 minutes, perhaps in a circular fashion, not really getting to the point and drawing out the meeting, unnecessarily.
Right, we're not putting the item.
Let's do the math. We can say there's 5 recommendations on, that means 3 opening statements, 5 opening statements at 3 minutes apiece. Okay, now we know there's 15 minutes out of, we can almost start to know how long the meeting is going to go.
I'll make a perfect example, the cancellation of the March 5th meeting. How would that scenario have worked? That means I wouldn't have gotten a second for discussion, right?
I think that's completely different.
I think we need to be very careful on that one, but
But didn't that item proceed?
it did proceed. But let me ask you a question. In that same regard, that would also force the person and the writer of the item to be very specific, because one of the things I've noticed is that some of the items will have an alternative methodology. It's snuck in there, and I think by limiting the time, it forces at least the writer of the item to be very clear. Now, there are some instances where you can't be clear because there might be a security concern or some other things. But for the most part, I think all of us can agree we can write an item so that everybody knows what it is. So that by making that 1 minute or 3 minute presentation, maybe we can have 2 minutes. We can decide on that timeline, and I like that. I think that will help streamline things.
And something was brought up about additions and deletions, about removal of items. And I don't know if we have anything, and I cannot remember if we have anything specifically that addresses removal of items from the agenda. Because it's been done before where a commissioner has removed another commissioner's item. I personally think that the person who is sponsoring that item should be the one to remove or delete the item from the agenda. I'm not a big fan of another commissioner removing my item.
I understand, but I do think that process has to be there for a multitude of reasons. I don't like it either, and I don't think we use it very often. But I understand your point, but I think there are some instances where, and that's where there's a struggle between let's say there's a legal concern. Let's say there's a incomplete item concern. We need to have some process in place placing the item on the agenda in the first place if it's incomplete. And I think if we did that, we would be avoiding that piece that you're talking about now. Because most of the time, those items that are removed, they're either removed because there's no appetite for them, that's possible, and that's done in every jurisdiction, or they're removed because there's an issue with that item. And rather than that become a public, half an hour discussion, I think there should be a legal ability for the lawyer to remove an item if there's a problem. No?
I can only give advice to the board. I have no authority to remove an agenda item. I don't legislate. So,
how do other jurisdictions deal when things are also? And another thing is when items are not ready to bring forth, and we're putting them on anyway, and we end up spending 40 minutes discussing something, and we've wasted the whole time, and we get nothing done anyway.
Well, I think part of that problem goes back to establishing hard and fast deadlines for submission to management to make the agenda. So the manager has time to review it. The clerk has time to review it. I have time to review it. I would appreciate more time on the agenda items personally. I think that would cure a whole lot of that.
Okay.
I do, because it would give us time to say, hey, that should have been advertised. That can't go forward for the next regular meeting, or notice has to be mailed out to all the neighbors, or whatever the issue is. So I think the deadline, working out a date certain for materials will cure a lot of the village's issues with that.
Go ahead.
You asked about what other municipalities do. I believe it's page 22, item E on the Miami-Dade County procedures, talking about removal of public hearing items from the agenda. And they discuss that the sponsor of the item scheduled for the public hearing shall be able to withdraw the item from the commission agenda at any time prior to the commencement of the public hearing. So it talks about in that sense, I think if I'm able to, if I'm able to remove another commissioner's item, I just think it's.
You can't remove it. The whole
improper,
commission has to remove it.
And it can be
Abusive?
It can be abusive, and that's the thing. I mean, that's.
What if it was a supermajority?
That's such a political football.
What about if it was a supermajority? Would you still object to it?
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, at the end of the day, this removing from the agenda situation will be cured shortly thereafter when the person who presents something that is unpopular doesn't get a second.
Exactly. Yeah.
That way, we're not stymieing anybody's ability to at least have their 3-minute statement. And if they cannot persuade anyone else on the commission to second for discussion, then it dies, and we're not dismissing people's recommendations out of hand.
With respect to the sponsoring member withdrawing items, some jurisdictions issue a cap on that. So let's say a commissioner puts an item on the agenda and withdraws it verbally the day of the hearing in the sunshine, but the manager prepped for it. Maybe we advertised for it. The village, I had to charge the village to review it and proofread it. So then it rolls, and then they put it on the agenda for the next meeting. and the same thing happens. A lot of jurisdictions put a cap on withdrawing the same item or rolling the same item. I recommend that
Okay.
because it could potentially be a waste of resources for that to happen. I haven't seen it happen here, but since you guys are diving into this, it's food for thought.
Yeah, I just think the easiest way to avoid any type of, appearance of impropriety or that it's a political game is you allow the person to have their 3-4 minutes, whatever, to present their item, and if there's no second to the motion, the item dies and we go on to the next one. The minute you start at the beginning of the
I
meeting
understand
saying,
your point, yeah.
I'm going to remove
Okay.
Commissioner Tudor item, there's going to be a whole ruckus. Oh my God, it's a conspiracy against Commissioner Tudor. Even though I know, okay, there's no conspiracy, this person doesn't like my item, but what I'm thinking is, then just don't second my motion.
Right.
That's
Right,
probably easy.
let me say my piece, let me do my best to persuade you.
Exactly.
Maybe it's not so great on paper in the agenda, maybe I didn't have enough time, maybe I spent the 10 days after I put it on the agenda crafting the perfect opening statement that's going to blow you away and change your mind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right.
But are we all in agreement that the opening statement should be limited in time?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it should be. I mean,
I have no issue limiting all of our comments. Let's say the example that you make the opening statement for whoever item it is. There's a motion to discuss it. It's seconded, so now we're discussing it. I think that we should also have limits on what we say as well as any argument. If we were in court.
In commission comments?
Right. Even our comments, the same way we want to say public comments are a certain amount of time, our comments should be a certain
Absolutely.
amount of time. It should be one round, and the person who is sponsoring the item closes it. And I would say the only exception, if you agree, is that if the person closing it just brings up something that is completely out of left field, let's say they didn't say in their opening and didn't come out, then under that circumstance, maybe we can have just one more round of comments just to make sure Commissioner didn't have a reaction off of
We
something
could do like
that wasn't
we could
stated.
do a short one on the second round. It could be 1 minute
Right,
or on the
but
second round.
it's only if
a new item.
a new item, something was added to the agenda that wasn't in the conversation. So it would only be an exception to have 2 rounds of comments.
Or there was something modified.
Right.
Okay.
I think that'll go a long way to help streamline, the meetings with that.
So we're all in agreement on that?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay, so
So did you say 3 minutes? Or you haven't?
can you come up with
So I'll just-
what's appropriate?
Okay.
Yeah.
Opening statement.
It seems like,
3 minutes.
I think 3 minutes is really long, actually, but
It is.
Listening to
It's
someone
quite a
talk
long
for
time.
5 minutes is...
3 minutes is really a long
Try
time.
Yes.
doing 3 minutes of stand-up
Let's just say
comedy.
no more than
It's a
3
long time.
minutes.
Yeah. And then each commissioner can have 2 minutes to follow or something to that effect.
In the exception.
In the, yeah.
Right.
And then, and I think the other, that's a big part about what we're going to have to establish is that, and that was one of the biggest meeting procedures aspect that I wanted us to really discuss, because I think that's going to help, like I said, with the streamlining. But also taking a step back, identifying, we discuss about quorum, but we don't really clearly identify about meeting cancellations, how those are handled. Even if I'm if something happened, I'm the only person here, I'm fine coming in. If a bunch of people want to stare me in and then we're like, we don't have quorum, and then we...
Yeah, I think actually most municipalities do that. The only thing I would suggest is that there are going to be times where it's not just a quorum issue. And we do have to have, and I would look to other jurisdictions to how they handle it.
Well, Miami-Dade County has one.
What page?
Sorry, page 17. It's part of that Rule 5.02 roll call. It puts the onus on each commissioner to notify the clerk ahead of time if they're not going to be in attendance. So if the village clerk gets 3 emails from different commissioners saying they're not going to be in attendance, then the village management is on notice that there won't be a quorum.
But don't we have a rule that says you only get 3, each commission only is allowed to have 3 excused?
Well, that should be, on that
That's a
note,
problem.
that should be part of what you guys work on here, because it
But you have
should
to
be
come in front of
clear.
the commission to tell you excuse.
And your boards actually have a more detailed provision in your code than the commission does about what's excused versus unexcused.
Yeah.
So we could just, for purposes
would
of a
just
first
say-
draft, just kind of like copy and
Right.
paste, and then in your readings, you guys can have an open discussion about changing language, but we don't have to reinvent the wheel on that. Your boards already have
I have only,
excused versus unexcused.
yeah, I have only one question on that. What is the remedy? And I'm just talking hypotheticals. What is the remedy if somebody missed more than whatever meetings? You can't remove.
Charter says it can be removed. Look at the
Okay, but we
charter.
can't remove this. That there's a statute issue. So I want to make sure we're in line with Florida statute. Whatever we
mean-
do, I don't want to be an exception to Florida statute.
What you could do is put in place a censure procedure. And, there's always recall elections. If there's an absentee commissioner who's missed 6 months, the electors have a remedy there. The Florida statutes have a remedy for that. So,
Doesn't,
and so does your charter.
yeah, like you said, to follow the boards. I think the boards have one if they miss three meetings. Isn't there a remedy that the boards have?
Unexcused
But-
absence.
Three unexcused
There's
meetings,
a
days
legal
what?
nuance there because
Yeah.
the boards are appointed positions and the commission are elected positions.
It's different.
So, right. So anybody serving on a board serves at the pleasure of the commission, and your code and your charter says that they can be removed at any time by a majority vote of the commissioners. It's not so for commission seats. Once your elector votes you in, you can't be removed unless the governor removes you. The Senate can suspend you, or your electors can hold a recall election, and your charter echoes the state statute on that. But that's it.
So what stops commissioners missing a lot of meetings?
I mean, technically nothing, but there's a remedy for that
You don't-
amongst
you
the
don't elect
electors
them.
who voted them in.
They just
So
don't
then
vote them
how-
again.
Okay, so then, vote them in 2 years from now. But what's the remedy now?
I'm sorry.
There has to be a
They
remedy
can
now.
petition for a recall election.
Right, and that would be a special election. They wouldn't wait. I'm sorry, Commissioner Johnson Sardella.
I would suggest if the language is tightened up and we carry over the language that's from the boards, if the absences have to be excused, and there's a difference between excused or unexcused, or you have to present something, if you have to speak and give your reason as to why you're absent, I would hope that would curtail any nonsense or unexcused types of absences. So regardless of whether or not there's some real guillotine that can come down if they have more than 3 absences, I think if the language and the procedure is for the reason for the absence to be disclosed, if it's a work conflict that can't be moved, whatever we want to come up with that's an excused absence as opposed to an unexcused, and it has to be
So
presented.
what do you do in situations if it's a personal matter that does not warrant public? And that to me is something that you need to address, because there are reasons why people could be missing meetings, whether it's health reasons, personal, family issues, whatever. And I don't think, in some cases, you would warrant not having any excuse rather than reveal that. So I think there's some situations that are not public domain.
Well, it calls into question, because I've missed a couple meetings because of health reasons. One was with
Right.
pneumonia, and so I guess one of the questions would be,
HIPAA follows that, right?
yeah, and that's the question, for an excused absence, can you, and this goes to the boards as well, can you kind of force the hand of somebody to have to disclose personal
You can't.
health
Nope,
information?
you cannot.
No, you
So,
can't.
so you just have to chalk it up to it would be an unexcused absence?
No.
Even though
No.
that's a little,
Well, then the alternative is it's not excused versus unexcused, because the only,
That's why this is,
Can you point us to where excused versus unexcused is defined? The language is in here, but it just says,
it may not be.
it isn't.
Yeah.
It isn't.
It's in
I just
the charter.
reviewed it,
Yeah,
and so that's a matter where reasonable minds could differ. Some might have thought my inability to find 4 hours worth of childcare was unexcusable. It was the fact of the matter, so we need to figure out where this line falls, and that presents another layer of debate, which is for a meeting that lasts 4 hours, if you're there for the first 2 hours and have to leave, what if you fall ill in the middle of the meeting? Did you not attend that meeting at all? So there's a lot around that, but the language of what is unexcused and what is not in there.
And how much is this seriously a problem for our commission for the last 20 years? I don't see a lot of commissioners meeting a lot of meetings.
Flagrantly missing
Because at the end of the day, if they don't come to meetings and they don't do their job, they don't get reelected.
Yeah, I mean,
that's the remedy.
Their absence is a public, it's a public record. It's on them, the residents know. The residents do have the right. The commission, we can't remove a commissioner. We can't unelect a commissioner. We just can't do that. So, but the residents can. So,
Right.
Can I add to that? In a situation, so some of us are elected for 4 years and some of us are elected for 2. We could, if we wanted to give it some teeth, we could say if you were elected for a 4-year term, first of all, we could look at whether or not that should even exist, the whole 4 years versus 2 years. But putting that aside, if you're elected for 4 years and you are absent from X number of meetings in the first 2 years of your term, you have to run for election again. Your 4-year term just became a 2-year term. Because I don't think people go to the ballot and vote for someone going, I want that person to sit for 4 years.
That would have to go to the charter.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm aware of that, but I'm just saying, if we want to give it teeth, then we have to vote on it to the level that it is a change to the charter.
And not an
But otherwise, otherwise, you could have an empty seat here, which does a huge disservice to the village, right?
Yeah.
Because we need to have a majority of vote on certain things, and if we've got an empty chair
And you're
consistently.
T2, you could have things keep rolling over. So I don't think it's happened, but it's worth addressing.
Yeah, I
And I
think-
think we need to be less, I think it would be better in the chart. I think what you just said would work better than sitting here with the excuse
Yeah,
on
and next month is an item I have on there for charter to discuss.
So you
charter.
want to move that on?
Yeah, let's move it over. to
And I think one thing that we should have though is, I think that there should be a requirement to have a roll call of commissioners that are present so that it's on the record.
We do.
Well,
We do.
So you're saying you don't think the clerk should be able to cancel a meeting when she's heard from a certain number of commissioners that they won't be there?
I personally think it's just better if they come in and then it's on the record.
Is it better from the residents' perspective? Like, what if somebody
they show up.
cancels work travel to be here for a meeting that isn't going to happen? And
I don't
the
agree.
clerk knows a week before the meeting that, Jenny and I went out to dinner and got food poisoning and we're laid up. I'm just coming up with something that she would know that, well in advance that we're not going to make it. To not let the public know that there's going to be a roll call out of symbolism. I mean, if I were a resident who had changed my plans to be here, I'd be pissed if I found out that we knew that we were going to have a half-empty dais
But doesn't,
Hold on, sir.
before when I changed my plans to be here. So I just want to make sure we're being fair to the residents in that.
And,
Well,
and hold on, just hold on a second.
advertise.
Just one at a time, please. Attorney Rodriguez.
So
you can't do that.
certain things require supermajority votes as to regular majority votes. So I agree with the county's language regarding checking in with the clerk if you're not going to be there. Because certain items may need to be removed, not because the meeting can't proceed as a whole, but because certain things are going to require supermajority and there's not enough people. 1. 2, there's also a cost perspective to keeping to having the meeting for management to know that there's not going to be a quorum.
And then to sit here.
And to have the attorney come and the sergeant at arms come and everybody set up to formally cancel the meeting. It's just food for thought because
But you have to advertise to have a meeting. You have to advertise, don't you? You have to advertise. So
It
you're
depends
costing-
when.
you have to give notice. You have to give
When?
notice of the agenda. And in certain instances, depending if there's an ordinance or if there's a quasi judicial proceeding,
Right,
there's
so-
advertising with it.
Okay, but you come up the day of the event, or even 2 days before the event, and the clerk says, well, we don't have quorum. You just advertised already. There's a cost. Who's going to bear the cost of that? But you have to advertise. Am I wrong?
I'm
Don't
sorry.
you have to advertise?
Okay, one person at a time. Village clerk.
I believe if it's an ordinance that was advertised
Or
and
variance.
close to the meeting, I found out that there is no quorum, then we have to have the acknowledge the lack of quorum, and then make another date.
And there's a difference
Because of
between-
the advertisement.
Right. And there's a
Only-
difference between canceling a meeting and rescheduling of a meeting. There may be reasons why meetings have to be rescheduled, whether it's for attendance issues, attorney issue, maybe the attorney can't come, maybe a variety of reasons why, in this case, we have a whole firm, but there may be instances where something happens and it's unforeseen. Or if it's foreseen, we still have to do it. I just think there should be procedures that are more reasonable. And
Aren't we supposed to not know who's not attending meetings? You're allowed to take votes. You're not allowed to take votes. I mean, to me, by saying, okay, we know 3 commissioners are not going, perfect example is the first March 5th meeting. We had 3 people that couldn't show up. I mean,
I would
I just
have
have a problem.
Vice Mayor Samaria
yeah.
not state that 3 people couldn't show up.
I think we should, I'm gonna stop here on this one because we've been already advised on that issue, so I think we need to move forward on without that one.
I think there's a benefit to at least requiring commissioners to notify the clerk or the manager or both beforehand. If you 100% know there's no way you're going to make that meeting. What the manager and the clerk are allowed to do with that information, that's for you guys to discuss, but I don't see anything wrong with the county's language regarding the check-in. It seems like a professional courtesy to give advance notice if you know, so people don't, so the manager doesn't find out when everyone gets here.
Madam Clerk, you had a comment?
No, I just believe when it's some items that need to have the majority of the vote, sometimes you can have via phone.
We don't have that equipment right now that work. We've tried that, and it really is an issue, but I agree that if some people can attend by phone, that would also be helpful. But
Exactly.
that's something we also should put in there is if
And
we
we
can-
should put
and have
the
equipment for that.
regulation, that
Yes,
they
it
can
can.
vote via.
Yeah, it
by
just has to
phone.
be in our,
We don't have
ordinance.
at the
We don't
moment.
have that in our ordinance.
Separate and apart from the roll call issue, your charter really doesn't give the manager much authority to cancel a meeting. And I know we're having a lot of conversation about quorum, but other things come up that could potentially necessitate a need to cancel the meeting. Maybe there's a blackout in Biscayne Park. That's just an example because I was in New York.
We
when there was a
did have
blackout.
that, remember we had
And
that? We had
those
that
things
one.
happen. So, I think you should consider giving the manager the authority, even if it's enumerated, it's really narrow, like, oh, if there's a power outage, if we're under a tropical storm advisory, or, even if it's really succinct, the manager should have the ability to reschedule a meeting, and that authority should be expressed in your code, and it's not. And that's part of the problem with this conversation.
Yeah, and I would agree with
Do we agree with that?
Even, let's say, a hurricane, you're in the cone of, and our commission meeting is going to land when the storm gets here. There's nothing that would...
Do we all agree that there should be an ability for the manager to reschedule a meeting if necessary?
On narrow circumstances.
Yeah,
Like, I agree
specific, a
with-
charter violation, a storm, whatever it is. If there's a legal concern, I use charter violation, but I meant legal concern. If there's some reason why there has to be, I don't know, we don't have legal representation, it could be 100 reasons, I don't know. But can you come up with very specific reasons that other jurisdictions do this?
I can do some research on that and provide.
Very conservative.
Conservative, yeah, narrow.
Right.
So it's not, there's not a broad power, so you can't just decide you're going partying out that night and not reschedule a meeting. I'm being very facetious because you're always here. Thank you, sir. All right, I know it's getting, and I'm trying to be cognizant of time. We may not finish this tonight. I know we have another item as well. It's 8:45, just to get a clarification on time. Commissioner Tudor, would you like to continue on other sections that you thought were critical?
Yeah, hang on 1 second. Well, we'll jump to probably the other meaty issue is establishing clearly defined decorum rules.
Okay, we're finished.
Miami-Dade County on page 28, they have pretty standard decorum language similar to what we have.
I think that's where we got ours from, as a matter of fact.
But the one that I like because it goes a little bit further and it basically breaks it out to members of the legislative body, city staff members, people addressing the legislative body. That's near the end of the support. It's actually part of ordinance number 03830 from the city of Montclair. It's near the back.
Did you want the one from Miami-Dade County or the one from Montclair?
I like the one from Montclair, and I think that's the one that we should build off of because it really does kind of address all participants, and I think that's something that is definitely needed.
I'm
It is
sorry,
going
you
to be
said 03
1,
what?
2, 3.
038.
It's like 4 pages from the back.
Yeah, it's 4 pages after page 51 of the Miami-Dade.
It's page 8 of 15? What was it?
Page 104.
From 90.
1 of 4?
Yeah, it's like 4 pages from the very back of that packet.
Here. Go all the way back past page 50.
I don't have it apparently, so I'll just share.
Oh, you don't have it?
Nope.
Oh, I think you're in the wrong item.
Oh, I'm in the wrong
Yeah,
item.
you're in 5B.
That's why. Okay, got it. Go ahead.
last two pages is
Got it. I got it. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think it's something we should discuss about expanding we need to have the decorum rules, I think, put into an ordinance. But I think we need to expand it, and I kind of like having language that addresses, like I said, all participants in the process.
I think there also, as a person having to run some of these meetings, I think there's also another side of this, which is safety. In this day and age, public safety is important. I've heard a number of residents will not come to these meetings because they don't feel safe. I've had 4 residents tell me this, and other residents tell me they just won't come because it's too, their words are nasty. So I think that the other side of this is public safety. I think your decorum rules have to have teeth in them as well, so that it has to kind of have that balance between not overreaction, right? But that if that is violated, there has to be something that can be done.
Well, what I like about their setup here is looking at that section, starting with section 2.14.020, going all the way down about rules of decorum for each participant in the process. Then going below that, addressing the legislative body, and then you start getting into the aspect about teeth and also about what the addressing the sergeant of arms and what they can do when you get into the enforcement of decorum.
Which will help protect the police, because that is a whole nother side.
Yeah, so I mean, we got to have, and it's only fair for somebody who is coming up there to speak before commission. They should know the rules, the ground rules, before they get up there. And they should know, whether we like it or not, they should know the line that they can tiptoe up to, but they can't cross. And if they do, this is what's going to happen. Because, otherwise, if we're going to expect the sergeant at arms to get up and we're saying, oh, well, this person getting too boisterous, the way it is currently, oh, let's have them removed. If I was sergeant at arms, I wouldn't feel comfortable putting my hands on that individual unless there's something clearly laid out that this is my role, this is what can and cannot be done.
I'm going to the attorneys, and then I'm going to have Vice Mayor next.
So
And we'll
one
go
way
after that.
to protect law enforcement further is the presiding officer controls the sergeant at arms. That's how it is. But a lot of jurisdictions have a commission override for removal. So if the presiding officer says, "Hey, he just cussed out the commission or whatever, get him out of here. He won't, we've asked him to leave, he won't leave." And none of the other commissioners agree with that. You could have a supermajority.
And in Robert's rules, we have that
vote.
now, technically. I don't know if you all know that, but you could override. Let's say I throw Linda Dillon out of the room because she's just so boisterous. And I say, Linda, I don't like your hair today. You have to get out of the room. And you all say, the mayor's crazy. So you all can then override me. It has to be all 4 of you, but you all can override me. That's already, I'm just saying that's already there.
Yeah, but there does need to be some codified,
It's a nice check on the
Yeah.
power.
What,
Yeah.
wasn't there a city that was sued because of Sergeant of Arms removing a resident?
There's been a lot of cases.
Well, yeah,
Yeah, I'm just using one case that I heard recently. So how do we solve that problem?
Well, you could get sued today for eating
$100.
your sandwich. It doesn't mean you're going to win, you know.
Is that the point?
But you can only do so much to prepare to be sued. You can't stop someone from suing you, right? So it's all about putting in place protections, checks and balances. The power sits with the presiding officer, but it sounds like there's a consensus that something should be added to this proposed language regarding an override of that decision.
And there should be a process so they understand what that override is, because I can almost guarantee you that they probably didn't even know they could override me. So I think there should be a process in place that's very clear
With respect to removal or in general? Because,
with respect to removal.
Okay.
Is what I was sort of talking about.
okay.
I know, and I did figure you that. But, you know, this is not a position of God sitting in this chair. This is a human being, and everybody makes mistakes.
See, that's part of the problem with your chart, with your code. It's that there's all these great things out there, but it's not in there.
It's not in
and
our
it should be
code.
codified so it's crystal clear and it empowers the commission to take action on things.
And also gives a balancing, which I think is important.
Because, I mean, I found that this one from Montclair really, I think, touched on and covered more areas that I think are more vital to the way we conduct our meetings.
Yeah, I haven't read, I don't, yeah.
than Miami-Dade counties. Miami-Dade counties was
I like that it's
agree
overly
with you.
general. This
I like it,
one
yeah.
It's
lays
very
it
clear.
out.
And it's
this is
broken
the
down
one
by
I-
audience members, so everyone understands, you know, their parameters. I do think there still is a little bit of subjectivity around personal remarks, for example. I'm quite certain that there have been occasions in this room where personal remarks have been made toward members of the commission or toward members of our community. So while that might not be as flagrant or upsetting as slander or cursing or things like that, if we're going to create the rules and we are going to follow the rules, then we have to follow the rules. And so if someone gets up for personal comment and says, "Will, you're an idiot," that's a personal comment and it shouldn't stand. And the first moment that it happens, if we enact any of this, then it must be enforced. As an observer, I have seen personal remarks slung in both directions with no reprimand and no action. So if we're going to create this and we're going to indoctrinate it, we have to follow it. And it's not pretty, but we follow it once or twice, the behavior will change and everybody will rise to a higher level of decorum. But if we just put it in here and then we're all like, well, I don't know if that was really personal. If the law says you speak to the commission as a body, then we should not be addressed by our first names. If the rules say that you address someone as Mr. or Miss or former commissioner or whatever their title is as a resident, and you say, "Look, Mary," and you, as a commissioner, say something derogatory and personal, similar reprimand should take place. But it does happen all the time. So I would love to see everyone on this dais at least nod their heads and say, if we indoctrinate this, we will act on it.
And I will tell you that as a person who's had a lot of research, not just with this attorney, but with previous attorneys regarding what we can and cannot do, according to Florida statute, Supreme Court decisions, and so forth, it is a very fine balancing act between freedom of speech and allowing people to do things. But one of the reasons I am a firm, and I'll go back to a point I made before, as a person running this, because I've watched people make comments, whether it's on Commissioner Wise, myself, different commissioners. We're all human beings sitting up here, and I can tell you that they've attempted to dehumanize us on a regular basis. And it's frustrating that not only do you have to take it because you're an elected official, but that the statute is very clear on ensuring public the right for freedom of speech. So you have to have that balancing act. So one of the reasons I am asking my commissions to please reconsider putting general public comments at the end. It will ensure we'll get done business in the beginning, and then the public stuff that tends to happen will occur at the end. And that is why I am absolutely adamant in this community that that has to take place for us to really get through business.
No.
And the fact that you're saying no indicates to me that when you ran, and this is a big issue, when we all ran for office, we said we do the best we could for all the villages to bring us together. It doesn't bring us together if we're allowing all this bantering to go on before the meeting. People don't want to watch the beginning of the meeting, they don't watch the end of the meeting, but in my opinion, it isn't silencing the people. It's allowing us to do it's allowing us to do the business. If you're concerned about public comments occurring too late, we can make a 9 o'clock point where that's where all general public comments will go and be done with it. But at least give us from 7 to 9 or 7 to 9:30 to get our village business done. That's my comment. Go ahead. Please stand up to the mic.
So if you're going to bifurcate public comment, are you going to give 3 minutes in the front and 3 minutes in the end?
That
Then we're
hasn't
going
decided.
to create you're going to double the public comment. Are you going to give 1.5 and 1.5? You know, think about what you're saying.
No, I have, and I've done it back and forth, but, thank you, sir. But I will tell you that whether you give 2 minutes in the front and 2 minutes at the end, you still get 4 minutes instead of 3, however you all want to break it up. But I think it's critical we start running like a village and do the village business first, and we can't do that if we're starting off every single meeting, every single time, with basically a personal attack. And so I agree with Commissioner Wise that if we don't have teeth, it won't work. But part of the way to cure that, without having to I don't want to be here running a meeting where I have to say, and forgive me, you're just right there, so, and you're always so polite, so even when you disagree, you're polite. So if Linda Dillon decides that, every meeting she wants to come up and say, I can't stand Mayor Trutman's hair, whatever it is, and she comes up and she's personally attacking and she's calling me whatever. Right now, as it stands, we have really no real teeth to address that issue. I can say you're not following the decorum rooms. Could you please address so-and-so? But I'm not going to kick Linda Dillon out of the room for that. I'm not. Unless Linda Dillon approached me, became crazy, then I wouldn't even have to tell you, you jump up into Sergeant at Arms and you do without me telling you. So I seriously believe if we want to have this place run like a village, we have to stop acting like we're an HOA.
Has public comment been, how long is this, you said a commission's been around? I mean, we've had public comments all the time. All of a sudden, this is coming up. That has to tell us we're part of the problem. We are part of the problem as a commission, because there has been public comments through all the commissions, and we have never had this much problems.
I don't agree, because I've been around in several other commissions, and it's been very cantankerous in those as well, to the point where 2 commissioners, I believe, there was a violent episode. So I don't think what you're saying is accurate. I think we need to stop acting like a small-town municipality in which we have an HOA-type mentality, and I think that's where we're trying to move, to run smoother, cleaner businesses. I can sit there and become very strict and run the meeting a lot tighter, and which I did in the beginning. And then people objected and said I was silencing public speech. So it's a balancing act. And as a person who has to run the meeting, I'm telling you, and I'm not going to be here forever either. And other mayors are going to walk in front of me and they're going to have to do it. We've had mayors that have been very strict. We've had mayors that have been very loose. I am telling you that if you move the public, the small amount of comments that have to do with general welfare, or make no personal attacks and make there be a significant consequence if there's personal attacks. And that's a difference between a political discussion of how you don't think somebody's performing. I have zero problem with that.
Well, one thing in the language here, under section 2.14.030, addressing the legislative body, item B, I like the language there because it talks about each person shall confine his or her remarks to 1, an agenda item before or during the legislative body's consideration of the item, or 2, any matter not on the agenda which is within the legislative body's subject matter jurisdiction. So if somebody gets up and wants to start complaining about, the color of, Commissioner Tudor's car, or, whatever, that's not an item, this one here would kind of put a limit on that, where we're able to stop the person and say, please, contain, and by having it memorialized, a person who's really coming in before the commission for a civil discussion will understand what they can and cannot say during public comments. So I think I think if we tweak this to fall more in line with what Florida state law allows us to do, and what our current practices are, for example, instead of 5 minutes, 3 minutes, a person is allowed to speak. I think this will help go a long way in finally identifying what the rules of the game are and what will happen if you violate the rules. And so I think this is what we have to do, and I think the language that's contained in this one is probably, out of all my research, is the best language that I've been able to find.
I'd still like to see some language that has to do with personal attacks.
And that's definitely, because then, since this is something that we're not going to draft tonight, this is something, that's when
and I think it's here, Mayor Trutman.
Is it?
Shall not make personal, impertinent, slanderous, or profane remarks to any member of the legislative body, staff, or general public that disrupt, disturb, or otherwise impede the orderly conduct of any meeting. I mean, I would actually put a period in there. I would say after shall not make any personal, impertinent, slanderous, or profane remarks to any member of the legislative body, staff, or general public. Period. Not because saying that disrupt, disturb, or otherwise impede the orderly conduct of any meeting, now we're getting subjective. Like, it just adds some subjectivity.
There's the lawyer will jump in. I believe you'll tell me this is part of Florida statute. The orderly conduct is, that's a big red. I would leave that to the attorney, because that's a whole nother.
Just a suggestion.
There's the subjectivity is always an issue when you get to the contentious, when these rules really come into play, and sometimes they really do. And that's why the authority sits in one seat. And again, there should probably be an override to that by a supermajority, but there's always going to be a little bit of subjectivity. What one person may think is maybe a violent gesture, another person may not. So there's always going to be a little bit of subjectivity when you're reviewing how someone's acting. But I mean, it's open for discussion.
And there's one more thing I want to add, because I am the person sitting in this seat at the moment. It falls on the responsibility of the mayor or the presiding officer, which may not be the mayor. It falls on the responsibility of the presiding officer. So if there's going to be liability for the city, or you do something that's a problem for the city, ultimately that falls on you. So if I am overreactive and poor Linda Dillon did absolutely nothing, and I just didn't like the way she looked, and I picked on Linda Dillon, and she sues the city, that liability is on me. If I direct the sergeant-in-arms to then remove Linda Dillon, and the sergeant-in-arms looking at me like, that mayor's nuts, you have no business doing that. It is up to the body then to override me. That gives you all the ability to protect the city.
I'm fine with that.
Okay?
Yeah.
And that will help the police department as well go, wait a minute, no. At the same time, just so you know, there's rules by the Supreme Court that have just gone through, the United States Supreme Court, that said if somebody walks in here, let's say drunk and disorderly, and disrupting the meeting, the sergeant-in-arms or any other officer in the room does not have to wait for me to ask them to act. They may act on their own.
And that's language
for public
that's not in here. There's no drunk and disorderly language in here, and I think
right. But what I recommend, because drunk and disorderly is in the Florida statute, period. You can't do it. And nothing in these proposed rules and procedures divests a sworn officer of their ability to enforce the law, period.
And protect public safety, which is critical this day and age. We are not living in the same world where walking into a meeting is necessarily, because I can tell you I've had 4 residents refuse to come to the meeting because they don't feel safe. And that's our responsibility.
Well, what we can do is we can add a 1-sentence addition, with respect to in the removal section on page 3 that says, nothing in these rules precludes or divests the sergeant-at-arms or any officer and sworn officer in attendance at this meeting from enforcing the laws of the state of Florida.
Yes.
Boom, done.
Okay.
Yes, I think that's a great thing.
Okay.
And that also falls before the United States Supreme Court.
Also, what I wanted to suggest, there's language in here with regard to addressing the legislative body. I understand that, but because we're small, and sometimes there may be an instance where a commissioner does respond back to a resident or an audience member, that the language should be somewhat mutual. Like, even though, yes, we're we have the onus of keeping the decorum, or the presiding officer does, or whatever, but that's still kind of vague. I think that there should still be a balance where it's a little, where it is reciprocal. Because the same thing, having no language there whatsoever, as elected officials, we have different rules for defamation. So we have a president that says things and can say whatever. I want the residents to feel like we're not going to be like that in response, where we. So I think there just should be a balance in the language. It should be mutual.
Yeah, and that comes to that addressing. That it comes to addressing the first name or second name. We can't legislate that. We just can't. And I think.
No, I
think that's pointless. If they want to do that, that's up to them.
But
you're talking about just respectful in this direction.
Yes, being respectful in this direction. I'm not saying first name or not. Linda could not mind if I call her Linda, but
she might be offended if I call her Miss Dillon, right?
Right, but you might offend somebody else in the room.
Right.
If I can chime in on this, because I've spoken with several people in the County Ethics Commission on this particular, the name thing, because they know we're working on our rules, separate and apart from all the other stuff. So here's the risk with a small jurisdiction. You all know each other, and the risk. Let me go back. Whatever rules you put into place, you have to enforce them on a content-neutral basis, which is a con law term, right? Constitutional law term, sorry. So what that means is, if your rule says everyone has to address the commission by their titles, but your next door neighbor is addressing public comment, the high school kid that babysits your daughter every Thursday, you have personal relationships with a lot of these people because it's a small jurisdiction. You all know each other. You have to be content neutral with enforcing these rules. So my warning is, be careful with restricting yourselves to really strict rules that in a small community you may, with the best of intentions, violate just because you guys all know each other. But the reality is you're violating the rules you put into place just because, that's your babysitter, or that's your neighbor, or that's your sister-in-law. So don't make them so tight that you're setting yourself up to violate them because of the nature of your community being so small.
Right. It's not that I want them to set up so that we're going to violate. I just want there to be something that's a balance in how we treat each other, because a relationship goes both ways. And if it's only one-sided.
There are plenty of people who call me by my first name who do not know me personally.
Same.
At all. So I think one of the lessons I learned from sending my young children to school, to a religious school that contained members of the Jewish community who were far more religious than we, is that we all rose to the highest level of observance out of respect for everybody else. So everybody ate kosher. Everybody wore a kippah. It doesn't matter if you are a secular Jew or an atheist Jew. You are in a school, and we have to conduct ourselves in a way where we do not offend those who are more sensitive than we. So if my babysitter is here and she gets up for public comment and I call her Mary, somebody else in this room might be like, what is that commissioner doing addressing that resident so casually? Is that what it's like here? I don't want to get up there and be addressed by my first name. She doesn't. So they don't know the context. And so I am lobbying for us all aspiring to the highest level of decorum. If we want to call each other by name, or if we slip up, I'm more than happy for Commissioner Johnson Sardella to say, Commissioner Wise, please address the resident appropriately, and I'll correct myself. Nobody's going to be offended by being called something more decorous than you are accustomed to in daily life.
And
so that's my...
And in that same vein, I agree with Commissioner Wise. I mean, I do it right now. When I look down the state, I know all of you. I refer to you by Commissioner or Madam Mayor or whatever.
And then I accidentally will say Jenny, and I mean, I'll catch myself doing that, not out of intent, but out of
And if we are supposed to be preserving the order in decorum, how do we do that if we're not also following certain rules of decorum? We can't preserve something. It's like lead by example.
So
We're not leading by example if somehow we're not under the same.
And I agree with that, but then how do you address the resident? Do you say Bob, or do you say Mr. Bob?
No, I
No.
say Mr. Anderson.
Mr., Mrs. Anderson, Mr., Mrs. Smith.
That I agree with.
Goes both
I
ways.
think that it goes both ways. If we want to be respected, we should, as we're sitting up here, the resident should be respected too. And if you have, let's say, Miss Dillon, you could say Miss Dillon.
Of course.
Or if she feels comfortable, Miss Linda, then you could say Miss Linda, but I think that that's what they deserve to have the same.
Right, I mean,
agree
sometimes
100% with that.
I have to stop myself because I might get ready to say the first name, and I have to take the pause. No, even though I know them, I have to call them by their last name.
It's a simple thing, as my customers do. I have kids that call me Mr. Dan, and that's the way they do it. I mean, that's the respect that they give. So, yeah, I agree with 100%.
I'm very comfortable codifying that.
Yeah, I mean, if I were, I mean, there's some residents that on an email basis will email me and I will say, Mr. So-and-so, and I'll get, you don't have to call me that, call me.
They get offended if you call them by the same name.
But it's a sign of respect, and maybe it's just the Southern in me, but I find that when you're in a professional setting, and
That's the
this
way it
is a
is.
professional setting, when you use full first names in a professional setting, it can come across as a sign of disrespect. Even if I know the person, I'll still call them Mr.
Every time I
Mrs.
send you an email, sir, for the most part, if I'm not slipping, I try and make it manager manners. It's not out of that I don't call him Christian in private or in a meeting, but out of respect for him in a formal meeting that could be polled, it's surname. I agree. I'm going to leave it at that.
That's how
I don't want to waste my
government is
time.
conducted.
Yeah,
It's how we
it's
do
good
it.
behavior, and I think on page 1 of 4, item A, rules of decorum, when it talks about members of the legislative body, I think that can be fleshed out, because, yeah, we should be leading by example, so we should be held accountable for our behavior from commissioner to commissioner, and commissioner, especially commissioner to resident.
Agree.
So I think having language in there that fleshes that out, I think is important.
I also may need some assistance from all of you regarding, and when one of you sit in the seat, and I'm sure one of you will, is when you have residents who call out who are disruptive, just generally disruptive, and they're doing it every meeting, most of the time, and I've watched judges do this in chambers. I just was at court on trial, and I watched the judge basically let the room go a little bit. And I think that's always a give and take. But there should be a point where if it's very disruptive or it's general, that I have the ability to act on that, but I want that codified as well, so that is it one warning. We've talked about this several times, but we haven't done so with the commission.
Well, just with judges, it's a little different because a lot of judges know that the issue is going to be appealed, so they let them build the record so that they can't say, oh, I had something else I wanted to say, and they didn't let me say it. So court's a little different, but this kind of dovetails into something that wasn't in here that I think should be considered. The ability to recess or adjourn. It's an alternative to physical removal. Not that you shouldn't have the physical removal. Sometimes that's, hopefully, you don't have to use it, but I think you should have it there. But an alternative is the presiding officer should have the ability to just say, we're going to recess for 5 minutes. Everyone needs to cool down. So, or alternatively adjourn. Like, let's say you come back and nobody cooled down, and it's, you're just not going to get any business done. That's not in here, and I think that's something you may want to consider.
I agree.
Comfortable with that. You got something next? Commissioner Tudor I've got something next look on his face.
Oh, no, not on this item.
I'm just going to ask one more question. So I'm giving instances, and I'm sorry to do this, but I do need my fellow commissioners' assistance on this. When you have commissioners that, or residents that do things that are disruptive, generally speaking, continually, we need that codified. I want that codified as to, what are the steps. I've already done it with the attorney, so I'm very comfortable with what I'm doing, but I'd like to see it codified so the next person or anybody else sitting in this chair knows what the response would be, because that'll also help prevent a lawsuit.
And what are those steps?
There's usually a series of warnings that you provide, and it isn't. But there is also going to be a point where, and that your sergeant at arms will also know when that is. But there'll be a point where, like I've had an individual walk up and practically spit in my face and lean over the dais and scream at me. It was after the meeting was adjourned or during a recess, and I didn't do anything at point. We didn't have a sergeant on, you know. But I do think we have situations whereby there's not going to be time for you to do warning 1, warning 2, warning 3. There's not going to be that. But I would like it codified with enough flexibility to allow the presiding officer who's ever in this chair to be able to call the sergeant at arms if there's something that requires this information. So I want to be careful there, because there's a difference between somebody yelling out, "Ah!" and there's another difference with somebody becoming more physical. So, go ahead.
For it to be an exception to the warning, like let's say just looking at this ordinance that we've been viewing where there's a section here for the warning, if it's going to be an exception to that, I think it has to rise to some sort of level of being, because again, these things are subjective. Think about like your example, if it was after the meeting and let's say the sergeant of arms wasn't looking, wasn't observing, then it's just based off of what you said to the sergeant of arms. And I don't know what even would be done after a meeting is already adjourned anyway for that person, because now the meeting is not actually moving forward.
That's where the police are allowed to act based upon the laws.
That
as
was my
it stands.
question.
Yeah, I
How
would
is
say
this
that-
different from that catch-all that they
That's-
still can
Yeah, the
enforce the
catch-all
law at any
covers that.
time?
Right.
It's not, but I think,
Because the only reason, Madam Mayor, if you let me say, because
I'm
the
sorry.
only reason why I would say let the police do their job with the law, because we have one village attorney, but still, you know, she's not a criminal prosecutor. Because I think it's rising to the level for us to start making judgments on things that are getting higher, like you're saying this is an assault, or it's a battery, or it's that I would be uncomfortable for us to start codifying how to deal with that. I think the police would be handling that.
Yes, I've spoken to Chief Cabrera about this quite a bit. I think I'm comfortable in saying that he would appreciate if the commission left those decisions up to his officers. They know what they're doing. And that catch-all will give them that authority. That
and I, as a presiding officer, have a right to, I have a right, they can just override me, that should catch everything anyway. Okay. There's a couple instances, and I will quietly, I will discuss them with you before. There's been some instances where a resident has either physically done things to the room, or there's instances where...
But that would cross over, I think, into like disorderly conduct.
So the police would have that ability.
Like
Okay,
that.
all right, then I'll leave it go.
Yeah. But if you see that, and they didn't see that, there's nothing precluding anybody sitting up here saying, hey, did you see that guy just, took a baseball bat to the veneer of the fireplace? I mean, yeah, point that out.
Okay.
They'll take it from there.
All right, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go on this, I'm just trying to make sure I've got everything covered. Commissioner Tudor.
So I think we've discussed and exhausted that item. At least I'm exhausted on that item. The next thing, so I only had two other issues that I kind of was wanting to see us to have memorialized somewhere. And I'll go out of order. I'm going to stick with where we're at right now, because one of the items is, I think we should have something there regarding guidelines for recording meetings. I know we don't have anything currently. It is allowed, and I think having just something there, and having like in here they have language about the recording procedure does not disturb or otherwise impede the conduct of the meeting. I think having some of the language that's included in this city's ordinance, I think would be.
They also have, I haven't read this completely, so I'm going to say that there's also other cities that have issues with press and things like that, and they have designated spots, and I think you have to be cognizant that there might be a time, not that I ever hope to go there again, is where you might get press or other people here, so you're going to also have to deal with the designated spots for equipment. Because I do think that is something we need to be very careful about.
And that's what I like about the language in here. It's not saying you can't record. It's saying you're allowed to record the meetings. There's nothing that stops you from recording meetings. It's just allowing the commission to say, for public safety standpoint or for accessibility reasons, we have some language in here about, you can't have the equipment that would block access for somebody coming in or blocking the view of or being, they want to bring in an 8mm camera and start recording and you can't do that. You can't disrupt the meeting. So, it's more like just a housekeeping matter. So I think having some of that language in there, I think, it's happening now. So we see it, we might as well include language on it.
From a legal perspective, I think it's a great idea because there's also premises liability concerns with some of that stuff. Like, this one addresses electrical cords, for example. If someone's walking into the meeting, the public meeting, and they trip over an electrical cord because someone has all this equipment laid out across the room and they trip, they're not suing the person who was taping the meeting, right? Who are they going to sue? They're going to sue the village. So I think this is great, and it's a way to protect the village.
Like not blocking lines, not blocking fire lanes, that kind of stuff.
Yes, my only question is, this sample says that the city staff is in charge with enforcing the above guidelines. That's a little vague. Do you want to make that the clerk or the manager or the presiding officer? I would put that on one person, so it's clear.
I do think it should be a staff, someone on facilities, not an elected official.
It would be better not to be the elected official because you don't need to be part of that. I agree.
The manager or the clerk.
Yeah.
That way, if one of us
I think
is
you
out,
also,
whatever
I think you also should be able to, because of safety reasons. I mean, you have no idea what somebody's bringing into the room. So I would also allow the Sergeant Arms. Yeah, go ahead.
Say something?
Yeah.
At Bell Harbor, they instituted a metal detector. Just like you have at the courthouse or I'm not saying here, but I'm just saying that's what a lot of cities are doing. So, somebody's not bringing in a weapon. But I don't think you need it here really, but I'm just saying a lot of cities have taken that step.
Do we have a wand
I couldn't tell you, I don't know.
if we had to? You don't know. I'm just saying, I'm not suggesting we do anything. What I'm suggesting is we have, unfortunately, this is the new world we live in. So I do think we have to maybe deal with that.
Just so you know, those kind of security conversations could be had offline. They shouldn't happen in the sunshine. It's a statutory exemption to sunshine law. Because,
Yeah, got it.
Okay. So if you want to have that, my recommendation would be to do a closed session meeting about security at meetings at some other time.
And I just want to make sure the language addresses it to allow the security to occur.
We could invite our Sergeant at Arms to bring his perspective from other local municipalities.
And then the only other item I'd like to see us incorporate into an ordinance, which was in the draft resolution, kind of touched on a little bit, but if you, page 4 of that draft resolution, and you can also find it located on page, I think, 34 of Miami-Dade County Code, Miami-Dade County Commission's Procedures, or page 32. Just laying out, and this goes back to about running meetings, rules of debate. Clearly identifying rules of debate. I think will go a long way. And part of the reason why I like to see something like this included is I could see this, once this is fleshed out and it's approved and it's boom on paper, I could see this, and I kind of talked about this, and actually the manager Manners mentioned this about it would be a perfect thing to add to a new commissioner orientation packet about how meetings are conducted, as opposed to go get Robert's rules and try to figure a little quick cheat sheet.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'll take that one step further and say that we could each have a laminated cheat sheet at our seats. So if there are any of us who are having a challenge getting our heads around how these rules work, there is something right next to you that you can refer to say, how do I get into this conversation? How do I get out of it? How do I put a stop to it? You know how that works, and it's right there. We could simplify the language even, Commissioner Tudor, to make it
A little less.
more plain spoken and a less oye oye.
And I would argue that B for B, I just think it would really be inefficient to do that. By the time you second move a chair and all that for 5 people, this is usually done in much larger.
Oh yeah,
commissions.
no, I would
That
want to
would be the
tailor
only
it to
thing.
what we're talking about.
Yeah.
For example, they even have item J, no motion or second. We
Yeah.
talked about that earlier. Reconsideration.
No, this is great.
Yeah,
I
so I
agree
think
Yep.
tailoring it to our size and
Yep,
I think would be helpful, but having that included in there as well.
right, and that would help with the conversation.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's really the big items that I had that I wanted to discuss that I think need to be memorialized. And then I want to see if any other commissioners had any other items.
So, Vice Mayor, apparently having?
Yeah, no, this is an item that we brought up, I think it was in January, the proper procedure for canceling and scheduling meetings.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I thought we addressed that. I thought we were going to do that.
No, we didn't.
Didn't we? I'm sorry.
I think we did it with respect to the manager, if there's like an emergency or a blackout or something, but maybe.
Yeah, but I don't
Vice
think-
Mayor Samaria's talking about something else. I don't
Okay,
know.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, the specific, my recommendations at the scheduled, no, it's at the scheduled date and time the meeting is held. The village clerk calls the roll. If there's quorum, the meeting will proceed. If there's no quorum, the meeting cannot proceed. If it is canceled or postponed, the village manager is to contact each commissioner separately to set up a new date or wait until the next meeting. Meaning it should be done at the day of the event. That's, other cities do it, that's the way it's done.
The only thing that I would add, Vice Mayor Samaria, because I understand that for the quorum situation, but we have to think about any other situation in which a meeting might need to be postponed or adjourned. And let's talk about postponement and cancellation separately, because cancellation means there's no other meeting. If it's postponed, you still have the same number of meetings, you just moved it to either another week or another day. But I think otherwise we're still having a black hole with regard to meetings being postponed, because our charter talks about not having a quorum and that the meeting can't go forward. And if we agree that, okay, if it's already been noticed, it's too late to notify residents that the meeting isn't happening, okay, fine, the clerk opens up the meeting here, calls roll, there's not a quorum, the meeting is canceled. And then, or adjourned, I should say, because then the manager will reach out for new dates. But what do we do in a situation that there's some other reason why the meeting is being postponed?
No, as North Miami does it, you have to come that day of the event. Are you going to say, well, North Miami's residents don't all live right next to City Hall, and yet they still show up at the meetings. Biscayne Park is small. There should be no reason why residents that I've spoken to said, yeah, I don't have a problem coming that night and knowing that the meeting is canceled. I just think
I've received email from residents saying the exact opposite, that I moved heaven and earth to attend a particular meeting and it was rescheduled, and
There's also a cost consideration.
Yeah.
But a cost consideration is that you're
Attorney has to
advertising.
come out, the attorney's got to be here, the manager's got to be here. It's not considered to the employees. If you know you're not going to have a meeting for whatever reason, and you know it well in
Who
advance.
determines what the meeting, what is
And
determined?
that's what we're discussing. Like, what are the other points in which a meeting needs to be postponed or adjourned? I don't want to use the word cancel, because I'm thinking about reasons that are just, there's some timing of something, there's some issue that is causing this meeting to need to be postponed.
yeah.
And
And
let's
just while we're discussing
figure out
it,
what that is.
While we're discussing it openly and we are recording it, just so that everyone in the room is on the same page, we've never canceled a meeting.
We had.
We've postponed a meeting.
Yes.
We've rescheduled a meeting. Canceling a meeting means it didn't happen and it's never going
But
to.
didn't
So
we have-
just to be clear, we're not talking about cancellations.
Didn't we have a meeting where we had a variance that was supposed to come up, that we had to move it to the next month, which made it 3 variances?
What was the same month?
Then,
Oh, no, the
What's
variance,
that?
happened
the
in the same
variance was
month.
moved, yes.
no, March 5th, we found out that you couldn't do it at the March 19th meeting.
Right, no, I'm saying
Okay,
the variance
okay, and then it was moved to the next commission meeting. At that commission meeting, we had 3 variances. Well, we had to hear all 3 variances, what happened at that meeting. The rest of the commission work was not done.
Here's the issue that happened there, and I agree with you. One, we're still talking about postponement, because we had the March 5th meeting postponed to March 19th.
It wasn't canceled.
The technicality is that there was an error. Otherwise, that variance would have went forward that day. There was an advertising error, which is outside of what we're talking about right now. I just want to make sure there's some sort of mechanism if a meeting has to be postponed for a legal reason or procedural reason, And we can come up with a reason that is legitimate and is not just going to allow, because we haven't even gotten to the point of whether or not it's administration that can decide to adjourn that meeting or postpone that meeting, or whether or not we do have to have a meeting and the commission shows up and votes on whether or not, after, I guess, hearing from, let's say it's an administrative issue, something came up, do we have to have a meeting to hear what the issue is and then take a vote to say that we need to postpone the meeting? I'm throwing things out, but there's going...
Very expensive, we're doubling our costs.
Right, then we have the cost, so...
Will this ordinance overrule our charter? Because in our charter, it says the only people that can cancel meetings is... Oh, I'm sorry. No, it's because I was asking you a question.
No, go,
Okay.
you can...
Our charter said, does the ordinance will replace what it says in the charter? Because in the charter, it says only the commission can cancel.
They have to be harmonious with each other. One doesn't override the other. I mean, they're supposed to be read together.
So then you have to change the charter.
Which provision of the charter are you
I don't have it in front of me. I don't have it in front of me.
regarding canceling meetings?
Yeah.
There's nothing in there.
That's what I'm
It's
looking-
absent and it's silent, so I don't see any reason why we couldn't put it in an ordinance that would clarify. However, I think the biggest issue, the only thing in the charter that I recall reading is you have to have 11 meetings. Well, we've had, for the record, way more than the 11 meetings.
This is the confusion, I think, when you look at the charter, because I know I had it here somewhere.
Yeah, I can pull it.
Section 4.01, Section C, subsection C, item 1, I think that's where some confusion entails. The only thing we really talk about that addresses that any three members of the commission shall constitute a quorum, but a smaller number may recess or adjourn a meeting from time to time and may compel the attendance of absent members, blah, blah, blah. That's really only where we really touch on it. So I think that's where the confusion has been coming up with some individuals who are saying, well, this means that you have to have the meeting and basically say there's no quorum.
Because it's absent.
Well, yes, but your Bill of Rights also isn't great on this either. It just says a postponement can't be unreasonable.
Yeah.
That's the most vague and...
Right, so we need to fill in the blank.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Now, would it make sense filling in the blank because of the way the language is in a charter, or a charter change, a charter amendment, or...
And you don't have to put it on the spot tonight.
Yeah, no. I'm just saying, what would make no...
Right, do we move this over to our next conversation
Yeah,
because
because
it's so
that-
fundamental?
That language, so that might be... I mean, I think we have to have something that addresses that process.
Yeah, the charter is broad on that.
Yeah.
So could we utilize an ordinance to tighten up that?
What constitutes
Yeah.
unreasonable?
Right.
Right.
Define it in an ordinance, so we don't have to change the charter necessarily, but we still
That
have
would
it
be
on
better
the
if we
books.
could, yeah.
Yeah. Because I think definitely there should be something there. I mean, it just goes through
It's, yeah.
the whole process. And even when you look at Dade County, like on page 17 of their stuff, they talk about conduct of meetings, and there's called order, roll call, quorum, failure to attain a quorum. But they don't really, I was looking through, I don't see about the rescheduling aspect. So, I think that's one of those things like,
And I think in Florida statute, if I'm not mistaken, there's an issue about just cause. And so the other thing we need to look at always when we do this is that we're in line with Florida statute, which I know our attorney will do, but I think that's the other aspect.
would it,
Well, some food for thought is you could put a provision in your code about at the next meeting requiring a resolution as to whether it was a reasonable postponement, whether there was just cause to postpone, adjourn, or
If that reason that's just cause is something that can be discussed, because that's
right.
the
So
other
then
side
you
of it.
guys, so then the commission has the ability as a body at the next meeting to ratify that the cancellation or the adjournment or the rescheduling was in good faith for just cause and was not unreasonable.
And suppose
So
it's
of
not,
record in the village's,
Clean.
Yeah.
That's probably
suppose
the
it's
way
not
to
in good faith.
but that would come up when, like, if you make a requirement in your code to bring that up at the next meeting, every time a meeting is moved, then that's going to be a discussion in the sunshine at the
why do
next
we-
meeting.
Everybody can hear it.
And you're either adopting a resolution saying, okay, after hearing what everyone had to say about why they were absent, or the manager's explanation that there were termites and there was tented at the time and we couldn't have whatever the issue is, Then there's a resolution that's adopted, and the commission as a body is ratifying, per the code, that it was moved in good faith, it was reasonable, and it memorializes why that meeting was moved, because I think that's part of the problem in the universe right now. And if that were in place, the record, the village's record, the commission's record would be very clear as to why something was moved or rescheduled.
And there wouldn't be,
canceled.
they wouldn't be filling in the blanks, we'd be filling it.
You would be obligated to have that discussion, and I think that would help move things along, and people will be able to move past it, because we're in July and we're still talking about March.
Because it forces accountability on the commission.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's the big
Right.
thing.
Yeah, right.
You know, so that's, I mean, and that's important, because you've got to have, you know, there's got to be that accountability.
It's a
So I think-
public, I mean, that's the whole point of sunshine. It
Yeah.
should be in the sunshine. I agree.
While we are on the topic, I have noticed manager manners that I am not going to be in the state of Florida on August the 6th. So here we have a hypothetical we can discuss right now. Is my absence excused? I am committed to be in another state for work. There is nothing I can do about it.
And that's a great example where all of us work. This is not a full-time job for us. Sometimes I think the community forgets that we are not the Congress of the United States. We're a small little village with working people that are your commissioners that have lives. And this is essentially more often than not a volunteer type position. So I do think we don't want to box ourselves in where we're so restrictive that if Commissioner Johnson Sardella has to step out on a call, she doesn't say, well, that's not reasonable, you knew, you shouldn't have planned it. Your life doesn't work that way. You're an attorney for a
We
firm.
all answer to people bigger than ourselves.
Right, so if I have a situation where I have to go, all of us have reasons why we might not have this happen. So I just want to make sure we're not boxing ourselves in a corner. So we allowed and understand the reality of what we are and what we are not. Because if you know, you took the job, well, yeah, I took the job as the context of the village in the context that we are. And I think we need to be cognizant of that. All of us work very hard, I know I do, for this village to try and help as much as we humanly possible can. I know the manager will tell you that I probably annoy him too much on occasion. But all of us work very hard to do the best thing. We all come in here wanting to do the best thing for the village. But there's going to be times where our personal lives, for whatever reason, that's why this excusable and unexcusable, unless we're missing a ton of meetings, I really think that's just ridiculous. I do. And I feel the same way for some of our boards. I feel that language is too restrictive for them. It's a volunteer board, for crying out loud. You know, they're discussing what an art program is. Well, you missed the last meeting, weren't excused. I think it's too restrictive. I really do.
To be clear, I think it depends on the board, because the code enforcement board
Yeah,
has some
not
pretty serious
quasi-judicial.
authority.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
not
they can lien
quasi-judicial.
property. I mean,
Right, but for our quasi-judicials, we have to have that. But for a non-quasi-judicial, some of that stuff is just overkill, in my opinion. Anything else? Commissioners? Great job. Thank you very much, and thank you for bringing this item forward. I guess unless
I
you
have a question
Sure.
before we move on to the next agenda item. So now that we've gone through all of this, what's my directive from the commission to try to put together something for a preliminary discussion? Are we going to do another workshop? Is this going to be, I mean, what's the next step so I know
I
what?
think we should have another workshop.
Okay.
I agree with
There wasn't a
that.
lot of residents here.
So what's my directive in terms of all the feedback I've received?
I would think if you put together some of the things that we're talking about doing, without putting the ordinance together, so it's more of a summary.
Like a memo?
Yeah, just an
Yeah.
outline.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I can do that.
And then we can have another workshop where hopefully more folks will attend and put their 2 cents in.
And then the workshop will be a little more
Interactive.
interactive, and it'll be concise, because we'll kind of have the
Right.
grid already there.
And you'll have some more meat to the general stuff that
Okay,
we're
so I'll
doing.
prepare it in like a bulleted memo format summarizing what we've discussed, and then that'll be the roadmap for the next workshop?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
got
and
it.
with the content that you might recommend, there may be, while not doing an ordinance, you might have some suggestions on that content after having done research.
Okay, I got it. Thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move ahead to the next item, which is 5B. I want to be very clear in this, since there aren't folks here, but I want to be very clear. And that comes to process as well. In the future, I ask my fellow commissioners, if there's something that you think is a resolution that we don't all know that's there, or something that would preclude somebody from doing this, I agree that on normal state, we should not be writing ordinances without the appetite of the whole commission. However, I sponsored an item that was upon advice of council because we are having issues. And that is how that went forward. I am going to turn it over to the attorney because it is the attorney's item, and I don't want to preclude. I will tell you where my sections were that I added, but ultimately this is the attorney's item. So, Attorney Rodriguez.
So the village in general needs to tighten up their boards. I know that here and there I've had discussions with a commissioner here or there or the manager about it as the issues have arisen, but the boards need, the code needs to be really buttoned up as to your boards. I don't want to belabor the point. I know it's 9:41 and we kind of did this dance at the last meeting, so I'm prepared to answer questions about it, clarify things if I wasn't clear before, but it's here for discussion, so maybe we just dive into the discussion.
First off, I didn't know that the attorney can bring up items.
I didn't. It's sponsored by the
No,
mayor.
she said it was sponsored by you.
No, it's sponsored by me. The attorney brought up some major issues that we're having, and I sponsored the item for the attorney. Just like I can sponsor an item for a resident, I can sponsor an item for, which we have done in the past as well. I'm going to make one comment in here that I think we might want to consider changing, and that was one of the objections that were brought up by several of the residents, and that has to do with sitting out after a year for the boards. I know that if you run for office, we already have that language in. That isn't something that we did, that was something that was already done. But I think it was Ms. Dillon, am I correct? Do you want to restate your objection so we can address it, just to be clear? Restate the objection that you had regarding the reappointment of the time frame, because I know you were one of the individuals who... No, there was an issue of sitting out, and I'll let the attorney address it if not.
I remember it.
Do you want to go ahead?
I'm not sure it was you, Ms. Dillon, but there was a resident at the last meeting who expressed...
Wasn't you? I'm sorry.
Who expressed a concern about the 1-year prohibition on being on a board if you basically quit. And there's a potential timeline issue because I think it's your charter or your code, you only do appointments in March.
Mm-hmm.
So...
Well, we do reappointments in March, but we do appointments anytime there's a vacancy.
Anytime, okay. So that's a point that a resident in public comment at the last meeting raised concerns about, because they don't want to, if something happens and someone quits a board, are they going to be frozen out? Let's say that happens in February. They wanted clarity, would they be frozen out for the next March?
No.
You know, that was the resident comment on that.
That was part of it. The other part was that if he's on one board, he can't get on any board for a year.
Right.
That's a big one.
And that's a problem is some people, like for example, let's say you're on one board and you decide you want to switch to another because an opening came available. I think that's something that we should allow because ultimately that's fine. I do think, however, when people run for office, that's when this first came up, that they have to resign from a board and not go back to that same board for over a year. And I think we should separate them out between somebody who's running for office and somebody who's in the community.
No, it never happened. When I left to run the first time, when I left to run the first time from the recreation board, I was allowed to go back on the recreation board the next time it came up, and it wasn't here.
That was before, and it subsequently was changed, and it was already there. So that's already in play now. And I'll give you, for example, Mr. Susi, who ran for office. He was allowed to go on a different board, but he wasn't allowed to return to the same board because that was in our code.
Okay. I'm sorry. Okay. What section are we under, just so I can...
Oh, I'm trying to find it now.
And I know this is a general discussion, but you referenced something, so I want to...
We already have in our code now, and I'd have to get it. I don't have it in front of me. If you give me a minute, I'll see if I can find it. It's one of my, I believe it was one of the text messages. But I think it was before we had our phones. I'll look it up.
I found it.
You
Page
found
6.
it? Okay. The way it works now for elected officials is if you run for office and you're on a board, you immediately resign from that board. and then you have to, 1 year later, you can reapply for that same board. However, it does not anywhere in that language preclude that person from going to another board. So let's say you run for office and you resign from the board in August, let's say, and then you don't get elected in November. You can, in December, you can reapply to a different board, any board, but just not that same one.
Why?
That's the rules. I didn't make them. That's already in code. That's already
I
codified.
understand that, but why? Why can't the person go back to the same board that he was on?
I can't answer what was done historically because I wasn't part of that, so I can't answer.
Well, can we debate now, what are the merits? We're taking someone who's got institutional knowledge and denying the village the benefit of their experience for, I mean, if there's a reason, like you said, you're not aware of why it was crafted that way. But if you're doing so great on that particular board that people are like, you should run for office, and then you go for it and it doesn't work out for you, why should you not be able to return to service for the village in the same capacity? It would seem that it hurts the village.
And
Whether it hurts the individual or not is neither here nor there. I think we have to think about the village first, but it seems like we're...
And you're correct, because that proved the point, because the Recreation Board, because I could not go back on that board, the Recreation Board voted, because I couldn't get anybody else. That's something that shouldn't have happened. Now, of course, I would have liked to have had other people to participate, and that shouldn't have happened, if other people participate, but if you don't get people to participate.
I mean, that's another option. You could say,
I mean, to me, in my mind, unless we can articulate a real conflict, like some sort of conflict of interest, there's something about you were a candidate or you were elected and you can't go back to the... If we can't articulate really a reason as to why it's not a good idea for someone who ran as a candidate, let's say you didn't make it and you can't go back to that board, I don't hear... I'm
gonna throw something out there that I don't necessarily agree with, but I'm gonna throw it out. I can imagine where somebody might think that that person took an adversary position towards some of the people that then got elected, but then we still can remove them. So we meaning the commission. So I can see...
Okay, so that person was on a board, doing a great job, ran for office, didn't get elected, now holds a grudge against everyone who did, and is going to return to a board that is supposed to be in service of the people that they resent.
I'm giving you I'm just giving you an argument for
it.
it.
A step further, I'm like, okay, that's the same board, but if they go to another board, there's still...
It's the same difference, right?
Exactly. So it's the same difference.
Yeah. And you can still remove any board member for any reason. So even quasi-judicial boards, you can pull people.
Right. You don't have to give a reason now. Right. That's what your code. That's the code you have now says you can remove anyone at any time.
Right.
Yeah,
but I mean, it's on the books. Okay, fine. But I just was trying to determine what happened there.
I don't have any idea how it happened, but I didn't, because there was a lot of people who came up to the board and they kept thinking that the attorney had stuck something in there that wasn't there before. I think the only change in language was the fact that you didn't specify the board, but it was already there, is my point.
Is possible to, what is the reason would be for a person that's on a board running for office that he has to resign from that board? Because the reason I'm bringing that up is you might stop getting, people that are on the boards might be great candidates, but will not run because they don't think that they're going to get elected and they don't want to leave that board. They're going to stop.
Running for office is always a risk.
I think it's appropriate at that point because you just don't know. If you're running, this is a discussion when we go for the charter of how we handle seats and things like that. That may change some of this, but for now, I would say I still think that's a good piece.
With respect to public office, that is a standard policy. If you, let's say you are you're elected to, give me an elected position. They're elected to judge. And you want to run for something else. Most places require you to resign because you can't simultaneously hold the position and run. Now, there's a really good policy argument that's being batted around about, well, what if they were really good at that and they just happen to lose the election and they want to rejoin the board? I mean, there's nothing preventing the commission from tweaking this to say that there's this the commission has the ability to reinstate after that.
I agree.
you know, because maybe someone is great. So if the commission doesn't like that language, this isn't just about additions, it's also about removal. You know, this is about amending it all together. So if the commission doesn't like that, maybe explore a reinstatement provision if that person isn't elected.
I mean, unless we can come up with...
If the seat's still vacant.
Yeah, if there's no reason sitting here up here that we can come up with, unless we haven't thought of it, I don't see any reason why we can't reinstate somebody to the board. And Mr. Suzy was a great example of that. You know, he couldn't go back to that board because why? Because there was some rule that says he couldn't. So I don't have a problem with that. But that was one of the objections, and I wanted to address that first. If there's no objection, if there's a consensus commission to have them look at that and see what other cities and other best practices do.
Perhaps it was crafted in a time where there was a line around the block to sit on these boards. And it was like, you stepped out, it's my turn now. We don't know. But yeah, I mean, it's worth revisiting, I think.
So
just revisit it and let us know if there's anything that we're missing.
I'm putting a reinstatement by majority vote, like catch-all provision. Once the election's over.
Yep. There was also an objection to the idea of conduct unbecoming.
Okay, I can speak to that. It actually was interpreted conversely as to what the intent was. So right now, your code gives commission the authority to remove anyone for any reason. You don't have to give a reason. So I added proposed language. Okay, that's on page 12.
Oh, thank you. Conduct and ethical standards.
And then
yes, it's 12G. It's under G. You know, I thought...
removal.
Yeah, I thought about this a lot, and I just don't think it should be there. And the reason I don't is because at the end of the day, the boards have to work in conjunction with the commission. And if we do this, it's the same issue I have with removing a manager, is you have to sit there and publicly go after a person in public, and I just think that's miserably uncomfortable for everybody. And I just don't think it's helpful to people. So I guess after revisiting it in my mind, I just don't think it should be there either. I think you should be able to remove a board member because you want other board members. I just think it leaves... I don't think most of us, and the history of this village, we have not been removing board members regularly. That's not been the occasion.
Okay, I just want to clarify for the commission. I did not add that for the reasons that were not even
It was the
implied,
opposite.
but alleged by the residents at the last meeting. It wasn't to stifle free speech. It was the opposite. It was to make the commission accountable as to why they were removing someone who was appointed to a position. Because your current version, just so you know, doesn't require
do whatever we want. Yeah.
You can do whatever you want.
Don't like your hat.
And
You're
if you
off.
wanted to say that way, that's fine. But that would have reined it in a little bit. So I have no...
I'll leave it to my fellow commissioners, but I think one of the issues we have is I'd like to see the boards work. I think we need to work towards making these boards really impactful and working with the commission to be on the same page. Right now, I think we have almost like a shadow commission in the sense that some of these boards are doing what they want over here, and we don't even know what's going on. And I think that's part of my issue overall. And I'd like to see that tightened so that we're working more effectively and efficiently.
Madam Mayor, does that not speak to a different issue? That doesn't really talk about removal. I mean, conduct unbecoming, you keep showing up. I'm going to say something nuts just so that we don't speak about something that could be interpreted any other way, but you keep showing up at board meetings without your pants, you know, and you just can't do that. So can we not all come together and say, there's been 6 meetings, no pants, you're off? That's different than what you're raising, which is what sounds like the business of the boards are not transparent to or in service of the goals of the commission. That's separate, is it not?
Well, what you have right now, it's on page 3, subsection 5. This is what you have right now, removal. Board and committee members may be removed at any time by a majority vote of the village commission. That's all your code says right now. So since there's a lot of talk about the ambiguity of the authorities and restrictions in the code.
Conduct unbecoming is a narrower needle to thread.
Right, but maybe you don't want it that narrow because someone's showing up with no pants. I don't know. But I mean, I think You could with what you have now, you don't have to give a reason. You just have to call it up for a vote. That's it. I don't know if you're comfortable with that.
I'm a little uncomfortable, because I thought about it, and that makes more sense, because then you can't just willy-nilly, you come in, you don't like somebody, I'm going to put my friend in. I like that idea of that, but then the more I thought about it, in order to do that, you have to have some rationale to openly then go after that volunteer to say, you know, you weren't wearing pants, what's your problem? Well, you have to go after them. I don't like that.
I think you should be able to. You have to give an explanation of why you don't want them on that board.
But that puts that other person, and they're volunteers for a board. It's like the same idea. I had the same issue with the manager stuff. You have to have a public hearing, and it's to me, it's, even though it's in the sunshine, you're going after why somebody's not there.
Accountability sucks.
But there's liability with that too.
But you're on a board. You're responsible for sunshine. You've got all the other burdens. Behavior, becoming someone who serves their village in an official capacity. That's the mantle. And if you conduct your behavior in a way that is unfit for the position, then it's the only appropriate way to do it is to air it in the sunshine.
But is that the only reason you want to be able to remove somebody? I'm sorry, sir. You're next. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Is that the only reason?
So let's say I decide that person, no. Let's say this person, Johnny Smith, is on the board. They just do nothing on that board. They're not conduct unbecoming. They're very polite, but they literally come there, do nothing. I, as a commissioner, want this board to be more effective. I want to change the board member. It's not conduct unbecoming. It's a different reason why I want the board member removed.
Well, then we might want to enumerate reasons. If it's failing to conduct the business assigned to them, that's tangible. That's subjective.
Mm-hmm.
I gave you, an assignment. I asked you to do X, Y, and Z. It's been 3 months. You haven't done X or Y or Z. I'm going to give you 2 more weeks if it doesn't happen. Opportunity to cure. It doesn't work out. You're not doing the job that was assigned to you.
So you're saying that if the commissioner doesn't agree with the board member for any reason, you can just say, I want you off.
Now
That's how it is now.
That's how it is now.
Right. I'm saying that hopefully that we can change that. You're right. That's exactly what we can
So,
do.
how do we have that? How do we have that in the sunshine?
I
We're
think-
taking you off. We don't really need to tell you why.
Well, no,
I mean,
I-
now that's
I wish we would go back.
totalitarianism.
I wish we would go back to the old way it used to be, where each commissioner got to pick a board member. And that board member would bring upon to that board on what that commissioner wants, what the commission's goals are.
Well, that goes to this charter structure.
That's how we used to do it, had advantages, but it also had high disadvantages.
No, this was
And a
because
lot of the-
commissioners didn't want to do their job. I'm saying past commissioners, that was the reason why it stopped. It's because certain commissioners...
No, there were other issues that came up. I was on a board that had several of those issues, and I'm not going to get into it, but I will say that there were other issues associated with...
Because like
it wasn't about the board being effective, it was about making sure your perspective was being held on that board. I just
Well, a perfect
created other issues.
Perfect example, for the rec board, I was picked by Commissioner Cooper. And I got to meet with Commissioner Cooper every time before the board met. And I got to discuss what's important to you since I represent you.
That's true. And that's true.
That's the purpose of it. I mean, the boards are supposed to represent what we want as commissioner. Am I wrong or not?
No, you're correct.
Okay, so as each commissioner gets to pick a board member, that board member will basically represent that commissioner. And at the same time, that commissioner will be paying attention to what that board member does and what that board does. And I think we should go back to that.
We could establish the same thing as by having, a designated member of each board report to the commission at every commission meeting. There doesn't have to be a one-to-one relationship.
Alternatively, you could have each commissioner assigned as the overseeing commissioner
That's what I
to
said,
a board.
yes. Okay, you can have
Yeah,
Because you guys have a lot of boards.
when she's done here.
That was it. No, just brainstorming. That's an alternative
Yeah, you could have one person be in charge of the board. Yep.
in terms of oversight, commission oversight.
So I think what Dan is trying to say is that you can have a situation where the minority's not represented because the majority's always controlling who's on the board. So if each commissioner gets to pick their own board member, then the minority gets represented. Otherwise, you possibly have an inequitable position. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that what you meant?
Yes,
Vice
thank you.
Mayor?
Yes, ma'am. That's what I meant. And it also makes the commissioner do its job. It means keep an eye on the board itself.
I understand. I understand what you're getting.
I don't mind having a commissioner kind of, having a little oversight on each, oh, you've got Park and Parkways, you've got that. I don't see an issue with. I think I'm more comfortable with that. The one thing that I can see the argument being with the way of a commission, like, okay, Commissioner Tudor, I picked my guy for this board. The way it is now, when you get a pool of volunteers and the commission comes up here and we select and we decide on who we're going to appoint, to me it creates more of an independent board as opposed to somebody who feels like they're accountable to solely represent my needs and my needs only. I don't really want that. I want an independent board of individuals who don't feel like they owe me anything for putting.
Right, and then there's also becomes adversarial. Let's say Commissioner A picked applicant A, and Commissioner C picks applicant C, and then Commissioner A and Commissioner C hate each other. It automatically sets up that board to have opposing viewpoints before they ever get out of the door, and that did happen quite a bit, in my experience.
Well, if you want to pick one commissioner, I think the attorney's idea of having one commissioner represent that particular board, I think that might be an idea.
Okay.
What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get what commissioners, even though we have a lot of work on personal life, that we pay attention to what the boards are doing.
And I
think maybe one commissioner being assigned to, let's say, code, or one commissioner being assigned to this.
Let's think about that. That's not on tonight's agenda, but let's think about it. No, and I understand your points, and they're very good points, sir.
With that, with that said, I think we probably have to address, item F with the communications. Because if we're going to contemplate whether or not commissioners are going to oversee a particular board, then because I think also this communication item was also something that there were some public comments on it being a little restrictive. I think it's on page 11 of 15.
11.
Okay.
Item F.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think, and I'm going to have the attorney address this. This was the main, I think, driving force behind the entire piece, which is that, and this is critical, we right now have people communicating outside of boards that may not be following the statute, and I think the intent here is to ensure all communications are saved and captured in the server. And this was brought to my attention for a couple of things that happened, and then I know the attorney and I have discussed this, the manager and I have discussed this. Our boards are not, just because we're small, which is what one of the comments was that was very disturbing, was that, well, we're small, we don't have to follow those rules. Well, yes, you do. And I think the attorney said it best when she said there's no carve-out for a small city. You can't change the law because we're small and it's burdensome. I agree, sunshine is very burdensome. It frustrates a lot of us sometimes, but at the end of the day, it's the law. And so I'll turn this over to the attorney on this one.
I think, yes, for me that these issues arising with respect to the sunshine issues arising with respect to the boards was really the genesis of the need to revisit this provision of the code. I have very serious legal concerns about our ability to capture and save board communications. First of all, they really shouldn't be happening outside of the sunshine anyway, but I have serious concerns that they are and that they're not being saved anywhere. And my concern is when the village gets public records requests for these for board records, we have to produce them. And if we don't have them, because there was no mechanism in place in your code to instruct the board members as to what they can do, can't do, how they should be saving it. Should they be CCing the manager or the clerk? Should they be emailing at all? Is it a sunshine violation? You know, and from what I could gather from the public comments at the last meeting on this provision, I just think it's a lack of training. I think there needs to be more sunshine law training for the board. That's why there's that whole ethics and sunshine law section and the requirement to do it at least once a year and check in with the clerk and to confirm that you did it. Because with all the boards, with the exception of the code board, that liability can pass to the village. Now, the code board can pass to individual board members. That's what the statute says.
Could you repeat that just so everybody hears it? Because this is very important.
Okay, so code board is a heightened board, right? They have the ability to subpoena people, call people to testify, lien property, which is a very serious, authority to be given by a municipality, particularly in a municipality like this, where you guys have a lot of homesteaded properties. These are people's, homes. They're not vacation homes. They're not investments for the most part. So it's a heavy authority, and the statute governing code enforcement boards, it's heavy. It's pretty heavy-handed with what that authority comes with, and sunshine law violations for individual code members can impugn criminal liability on the individual code members, and I don't think they know that, and that's something that we need to do a better job of protecting them with.
Just could you let her finish, and then you're welcome to come up, Linda. Go ahead.
Okay, so my concern is that I have seen email communications to the code enforcement officer from the code board about code violations or believed code violations. Those should be totally separate. There should be no email communications from any code board member or code board meeting outside the sunshine about a potential matter that may come before that board. They're basically judges. And I think there needs to be better training on that. And I'm not saying there's any malice to it. I just don't think there's sufficient training for the heightened authority that the commission has given these board members. So if you don't adopt any of these proposed changes, my recommendation is you do as to the code board to protect the code board members. They're held to a higher standard than the other code board, the members of other village boards.
Go ahead, Ms. Dillon.
I'd like to take exception to what you're saying, because in my 12 years of the code board, I have never seen an email from any other board member regarding any cases. Any emails have been perhaps from the code enforcement officer to us talking about cases that are coming up, but they're only like agenda items and things like that. To my knowledge, there's never been a violation from anyone since I've joined the board.
Village manager, can you?
And annually, we have had training on sunshine laws.
And to clarify, I've never seen one of those emails come from you or have you on them, just to be clear. And then, village manager, if you could just...
Yeah, Ms. Dillon, I think you're probably an exception to the rule on that. This does happen. We have several board members who are constantly emailing the clerk or the code officer. And so from that perspective, they shouldn't be doing that. There should be that line drawn between the two, if I understand that correctly.
Yes, it's a potential due process issue.
I know some of the commissioners have received them as well.
And this is specifically, because we just want to make sure we're clear, this is specifically conversations that are with the code officer that are before hearings on particular items that are going to be heard at that hearing because of the quasi-judicial status.
Or potentially creating a violation that will end up coming before them, because the genesis started with a code board member emailing code enforcement about a potential code issue. You see how it's circular? And then the risk there, besides the potential due process issue with doing that, is when the item comes before the board, are they recusing themselves? Are they doing a Jennings disclosure about those communications?
Because the issue from the resident standpoint would be individual A reported me for the code violation, an individual A sitting in judgment of me on
And
the
dropped the
code
hammer on
violation
it,
that they
yeah.
just reported me. Yeah, I can see where that can, yeah, I could see the difficulty in that respect.
Then I probably would suggest, because I'm looking at the language here on page 11 of 15, and my suggestion is, yes, it's tailored to not, so that sunshine violations are not created or caused. It seems a little heavy, and I want to ask you this as to whether or not it's a sunshine violation. Let's talk about the topic first of like designating just the chair to be communicating with either the clerk or the village manager. If it's any other board member that's communicating with the clerk or the village manager, that's not a sunshine violation, if I understand it.
Right, provided that they're not, basically having communications with other board members using the manager as a conduit or the clerk as a conduit.
And the reason why I say it is because each of us as commissioners can email the village manager or the clerk. How could we designate, let's say, the mayor to be the only one emailing the village manager or the clerk? Because the only time we talk is at a commission meeting, so what would she be communicating? So I don't have an issue making sure that board members understand that you can't use the village manager or the clerk as a conduit. Just whatever the standard is, and the same standard that we follow, I'm fine with. Now, if we have to have a separate resolution or something for the code board, because I agree with you, the sunshine rules are hard to understand even for lawyers, lay people. So the code board being that type of quasi-judicial board, I think, yes, there has to be more care that those board members don't violate, because you have residents that can take these things on appeal. There's really an issue if it's personal to that board member. But I think for regular boards, if we tailor this, whatever we have to do as commissioners to not violate sunshine, it should be the same for the boards.
But we have email
servers.
servers.
More stringent.
But we have email addresses that always end up at the server.
Yeah, but they can have email addresses as well. Each board member, and they communicate with the clerk or the manager through that village email.
I like that idea, and that kind of goes into the other reason this language was crafted is we need some sort of storage for those communications. And right now, using personal emails,
I don't think we should allow personal emails to be used, period.
And that would really solve most of the issue. Right. Is if board members board member email one, like however you guys want to.
Right. The only reason why, and I'm sorry, Vice Mayor Samari, the only reason why I stated it, because like if I'm looking at F3, sending an email from an official designated email by an individual other than the chair is strictly prohibited. Like it's so strong, and I'm like, that is more than what we do as commissioners. We just have to, because if I hear what the intent is and the purpose is to avoid the sunshine violations, the purpose is to be able to capture these messages for public records requests, it doesn't like this level isn't required to do that. We just have to be sure that it's an official email, and that they know that they can only communicate with the village manager and the clerk, not to each other, and not using them as a conduit. I think because I think it's a shock to the system maybe for some board members when they're reading this, like it's way more than
there's the only other option is to force a BCC, but then you really don't know. And that, in other words, I think we have this now a little bit, and forgive me, but I don't think we should be using our personal emails ever once you're elected official. The question becomes, and there's kind of a couple avenues you can take with this. You can assign everybody an email, which may, or especially for the quasi-judicial boards, I think that's the critical mass there. And then any communications they have regarding village business needs to go to that particular email.
That would resolve the concerns that I had about the emails being saved for public records request purposes. If every board member had an assigned village email, that would solve the issue.
And they would have to, anything to do with the boards, they have to use that email, period. And that includes the commission, should be on the commissioner should have the same requirements. That if for some reason, because I've had people accidentally email me and I immediately forward it to the village. I'm sure other people sitting here have had the same situation who were former commissioners, but everything I do is through that village server. Everything. And I think that's something we need to do not just for the boards, but for every commission here and in the future. I think that should be a mandatory piece.
I think you answered this question, but since this person is on the Parks and Parkway, I just wanted to give you the chairperson's question. It's okay.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, and I think you already answered it, but just to clarify, Chair of Board, Barbecue, uses designated village email account. I will have to check the account every day. What purpose does that really serve? I think you answered the question, but just she asked me to.
The answer is because it's the law, and I'm not trying to be difficult. If you're going to be a chair on a board, and do you have to check an email? Yeah, I've got to check I've got 5 emails, you know. So I check multiple email accounts. I put them on my POP account on my phone, and I check them every day, and they come up on my phone. So there are ways, technology-wise, so that it's not so annoying. But I do think the prudent thing at this point is to make sure we're not violating the law, and that there's not an exposure to both the residents who are volunteers on a board and who are doing this mostly out of the goodness of their heart to protect them, but also to protect the village. And I don't think if we give them and designate them to have emails, that solves the issue. If you say, oh, could you please courtesy copy? Well, then you get some people who do, some people who don't, some people are technology oriented, some people are not. I almost think that they have to have village emails, but however, there has to be a codicil that those village emails are not to be used in anything other than related to that board's business. If not, you'll have a whole nother Pandora's box you're opening up there, where they send out to, I don't know, they use their position in the board to do X, Y, and Z. So there has to be some sort of contractual agreement, whether it's signed, written, or whatever, so that everybody knows that that's what it's used for.
See, I have no problem with issue now. Would it be easy for the village, or it's going to take up staff time, to set up an account for each board member? Because I agree 100%. If I, as a commissioner, have to go by to a village thing, the board members should do that too. Would that be difficult for the commission?
It would be horribly difficult, no. It's really...
And that would protect them at the same time, too.
It'll save them time, too, because if they do get a public records request, they won't have to bother the board member, hey, go through your email and send, the clerk can do that, or pay the IT people to do that.
And it doesn't stop someone from violating the law. At the end of the day, if somebody chooses to use a personal email to cross-communicate, to meet over people's houses and to do all those types of things, it's not going to stop somebody from breaking the law. What it'll do is make us as a village run more like what we're supposed to run, and put everybody on notice that that's the law and you have to follow it.
Well, it shows it also, it sets the stage that the village has policy in place to stay in good favor with Florida Sunshine Law. Everybody, this is your official email address used for official business. Don't communicate it with other board members, other commissioners. For the commissioners, told not to email each other on items that may come before us. So I think it's important. It's a way just to also protect the individual board members, protect the village as well, to be able to say, listen, this is a rogue individual, just like with a commissioner. If the commissioner gets caught that they're violating sunshine law using their personal email accounts or their burner phone,
It's on that individual.
it's that, the village can at least say, listen,
Should
we've
we
done
like-
everything we can possibly.
They circumvented what we have.
Yeah, and that's the key thing. Now, that the next question would be about how do we have to capture text messages from some of these board members? Are they aware that they have to, that their personal phones would have to be turned over?
Can we have a policy that covers that?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I just think that a lot of this comes out in the training. If you have the ethics committee will come here, and it's going to come out then, and if the repetition of understanding, and if someone tells me that if I insist on using my personal email or text, then okay, understand that your phone could be confiscated, your laptop can have a forensics done on it, that your privacy is no longer going to be private because you commingled. I don't think we need to overly legislate, but I agree, and the boards are getting lessons in ethics training, but if that is something that's always repetition in the ethics training, then we're all adults. The onus is on you. If the emails are set up for them, and we have it here that, okay, you can only email through the official village email, village business, then it's there. No one can say that the village didn't provide it. If that individual board member circumvented that, they've been provided notice, they know what the rules are, they've been ethically trained, they understand what the repercussions are. You can't legislate for everything.
No, and on that note, we've been talking a lot about intentional circumvention, but people move. Mm-hmm. People die. You know, what happens if you get a records request for all communications from a year ago, but that person moved to Alaska and is not going to respond to the village clerk's request to go through their personal emails about some code hearing from a year ago? Or what if that person was hit by a bus the day before? And, you know, how would the village comply with the records request in that instance? You wouldn't be able to. So this also protects against not just intentional circumvention, but like life happens. And you don't want to be in a situation where you have to circle back to an individual to comply with the records request. I mean, with text and stuff, yes, sometimes that happens, but in general, emails, we can clean that up, so that's a very quick record-keeping process and automate it.
Is it that big of a deal to have a policy that basically says don't text village business to prevent this, or recommendation or something? I'm not trying to over-legislate, but at least recommend it? Something. So that said...
That's part of the whole training is
it is recommended in the ethics
making
training.
those recommendations so that people are aware.
Okay.
And that's why we do the training annually, is to remind people as well as to inform new people.
There's also another side, which is the social media side. And that's something we haven't touched on. But it is something that is a tool that's used, like for the art board, they sent out, and it's not a big deal. They have a poster and they send it out. And you put it out in the e-blast, so it's not like we haven't captured the poster. So it's not a problem. But at the same time, I do think we have to be cognizant of social media policies as well to make sure we're not capturing. So, for example, if I go on a social media site and I interchange with a resident on village business about, depending on how many I have, usually it's once a month, sometimes once every 3 months, depends on how much I'm on social media. I'm not on a lot. But I'll always make sure that I then capture every one of those text messages, or whether it's a private instant message, and I'll let them know, and I then put it back into the server so it's a public record. I have a feeling, based upon what I've seen in the past, many people do not do this, that have sat on this commission, that have social media blogs and so forth, and never copied it into the record. And I think that's another issue we need to address, because it is the law.
Their attorney general opinions on that I can include in the materials, since that's a concern that's been raised. I can include that in the materials for the next workshop or reader.
Communication workshop. You can roll it into communication workshop.
Because if the social media post is being made in the capacity that could appear to someone that it's on behalf of the village as an entity, that needs to be captured and saved. So I can circulate that to the clerk to include in the materials.
And I do think that should be part of our policies or our ordinances. I do think we need to, unfortunately, because it's the law, find a way to do that, at least so it's it's codified, so we know what the rules are, and not just fall back on statute. I think it has to be right there up in front, because most people don't run to Florida statute and say, ooh, I didn't know that was going to be a second-degree misdemeanor. I didn't know I could be charged, money, or I could go to the state attorney's office or whatever. I'd like to make it easier, especially for the boards, so they know what the rules are, because they come, they go. We have board members come. Some will stay for 2 months, so some will stay for 20 years. But I do think that's there, and I also think that, despite of some of the training, people are making conscious decisions to violate the law, and whether we want to openly discuss that or not, it is what's going on. And I do think we have to be more. As a commission, we're responsible for
Madam
ensuring
Mayor,
that.
If we have evidence of that, then is that not conduct unbecoming? Doesn't that take us back to where this conversation began around the removal from a board?
The board I'm most concerned about is the code board. I'm going to open that up, and board members here who I respect, we're having issues. I think we're having issues that are, and I don't think this is necessarily the time for that discussion, but I do think we are having issues, and I am concerned because of that.
If there are activities going on, sorry, I had my back to you, I didn't know. If there are activities going on that could expose the village to liability, then it's our remit to do something about it.
Well, on that note, one, I think we need to be measured in what we say generally. That being said, as I previously stated, the code board does have more authority than the other boards. They do. And the Florida statutes treats code enforcement boards as such. So one thing that I'd like clarification on generally is why an attorney doesn't preside over the proceedings with that board, and just so the village knows, that can't be my firm, because the statute expressly says that the code enforcement board is supposed to have an attorney separate from the municipality's attorney. And I don't know if you all knew that. I don't know how long it's gone on that way, but
Forever. You've been here for 12 years. Have you ever had an attorney sit in your meetings?
Occasions.
okay, the statute expressly states that the attorney for the municipality cannot be the code board's attorney. So that's, I mean, maybe that's something for budget hearings.
I'm sorry, could you go to the mic, just if you don't mind, so I can capture it? Thank you so much. Sorry, Linda.
Poor Miss
Miss Dillon. See, I slipped again, Miss Dillon.
I can only recall maybe one, maybe two cases where the village attorney attended the meeting, but he really was not involved in that procedure of any kind. He was there to advise if necessary. He didn't take a stance on what was being discussed or voted on.
Was that to, and not to Monday morning quarterback, if you recall, was that to advise the code enforcement officer as village staff, or was that to provide legal advice to the board?
It was to clarify some legal issues for all of us on the board, where the code officer may have had one interpretation, the board had a different one, and it required some clarification, but it really did not involve voting on a specific case or not.
Okay, so the statute requires that the code board, if you're going to appoint an attorney to preside over code board proceedings, which I recommend based on some recent things that have happened, it has to, just so everyone knows, that it can't be our firm. That would have to be a separate appointment.
Can I ask, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I would suggest, because, you know, I'm looking at the time at 10:28, and because our village attorney has made quite clear that the code board should be viewed differently, I think that either this should be a separate issue for us to be able to flesh out and discuss what needs to be done with the code board. If we keep trying to intermingle it into this conversation, we're not going to get anywhere either way, because the structure, I think, is going to be completely different, and I think it should be an opportunity in which the full board is present.
Yeah, I'm on board with Commissioner Johnson Sardella, just so that we can get back to the focus of Commissioner Tudor's, or I'm sorry, I forgot we moved
Attorney
on.
Rodriguez.
I'd forgotten we'd moved on to yours.
Attorney
Regardless,
Rodriguez.
to get back to that, because this obviously is a meatier discussion, so
I agree.
let's go back to where we were and finish.
Okay, so do we have a, I'm sorry.
I just left a word off the end of my sentence. Just fell out of my mouth. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Is there any appetite? Well, do we all agree that the preference at this point, and I'll let the staff work it out, is to have emails for the board members? We're not going to just code here. Code's going to be a separate issue.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes. A separate section of the
Yeah.
code. Like, it's a whole other section.
And I don't know if you need to do anything with P&Z as well, because it's quasi-judicial, so you'll have to look at that.
That's why I'm going to suggest P&Z also.
Yeah, I would
Yeah,
suggest
like, there should
the
be a
quasi-judicials.
Quasi-judicial.
There should be a separate section, like when we're looking at if this is going to be in the ordinances or whatever, advisory boards
Versus
versus
quasi-judicial.
quasi-judicial boards. I like that idea. Have to be handled differently.
Yeah,
I like that idea a lot.
Okay.
two distinct beasts.
Very
Do we want to, is there anything else in here? Well, I'm going to leave this to open for the commission, because is there anything else you all want to discuss that's here? I know we had discussed, those are, I think those were the main points that people were upset about. The only other one is social media, which I mentioned already, which isn't in here.
Yeah,
And
I
I-
think this, I apologize, Madam Mayor. I think the social media, if we're going to have maybe a communications, did someone mention having a discussion about communications?
Yeah, but I'm just talking about this. I'm talking about the sunshine portion of that being captured, that's all.
To me, I feel like if we already have language that says that you must communicate from your village email, again.
Only, yeah, I'm sorry,
if
that would
I
take care of
have
it,
to
yes.
state the affirmative, you can't communicate.
No, you're
through
right,
social
it's
media.
already here. It's already here. Okay.
There's already an only.
Right.
I don't have anything else. Anybody else have anything to add?
No, Madam Mayor, no.
Do we all agree on the 1 hour training?
Yes.
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 Okay. I think we're done for this evening. Is there any direction that the village attorney, I think this is the same kind of thing where it's cleaning it up, and do we agree that since she's already written an ordinance, do you want her to go ahead and just clean up the ordinance?
No, don't you have to bring the ordinance up for this discussion? This is not technically, you can't vote on this tonight, so that...
No. I'm asking for direction for the attorney. Is it okay for the attorney to go forth and just clean up the language based upon the conversation we had tonight? Because I think we've pretty sussed it out.
Yeah, I think it'd be better to clean up the language that's in what's the current draft, bring it back to the commission, then as we look at it with,
As a discussion item,
discussion
not as
item,
not
fresh
as
eyes,
in a
we may be able
first
to-
or second reading.
yeah, there may
Okay.
be some
No problem with that.
tweaks we want to do.
So I know my deadlines, are you planning on having this for discussion for August, not for read, but for discussion
Yes.
at the regular August commission meeting?
Can you do it at that time?
Yes, I just want to be clear. so
Everybody
we-
okay with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
There was a couple of the points that were brought up, and I just want to make sure, I'm hearing whispering here in the corner. Two of the commissioners have conflicts on dates, so I'd like them to bring that up so we can discuss that in the sunshine so that everybody knows. You brought up one?
Yes, I will be out of the state for work. It is not something that I can withdraw from. It affects multiple individuals who are flying from different cities all over the country, and so I cannot be here on August the 6th.
And that's the date we're doing the...
That's our commission
Yeah.
meeting.
It's a regular commission meeting.
Yes.
Yes.
And I believe Commissioner
And-
Johnson Sardella is going to be out on
The July 30th, because I will be in California sitting for the California bar.
That is a beast, that one.
You just need another bar.
We still have quorum for the 6th, is what you're saying.
We have quorum for both.
We have quorum for
Right,
both.
there's quorum.
Is there any desire to reschedule? Just a moment, let me speak first. Thank you. I have no problem rearranging to accommodate the other commissioners if that's needed. I think the regular commission meeting was the bigger of the two, or not. I'll leave that up to my fellow commissioners.
Now that we've moved the first budget hearing, is there any wiggle room in moving the workshop so that all of us are present?
No.
Before you say no, can we at least find out if the schedule, if that's possible? And then we can have a consensus on that.
Yeah, I think we can probably do that. I need to look at it. I can't tell you right this second, but let me look at it and email you guys tomorrow.
Okay.
And that's for the September, I'm sorry,
That's for the July
July 30th.
30th meeting.
Okay,
Commissioner Johnson Sardella, when will you return?
I will be back the Monday, I think it's August 5th, if I'm not mistaken. I'll be back right before our meeting.
Okay.
So what you're saying is you want to move the meeting from the 30th because one commissioner can't be there?
Is that a workshop?
If
It's a
that's-
workshop.
that's
It's
the
not a
will of the
meeting.
commission, yeah.
It's
Right,
a
if you-
workshop,
if
it's
you
not
guys feel
a
like it,
meeting.
it's
Yeah,
not.
but isn't there a timetable on this second workshop that has to be for the budget? We have a timetable, don't we?
No, but since we postponed the hearings that come after this,
To September 10th. So I would like to allow the accommodation for the commissioner as requested. Is there anybody else who objects to an accommodation for a workshop rescheduling? You don't object? We can't take a
What are we
vote.
talking about?
We can't take a vote, but I just want to get a consensus. Commissioner Tudor, do you have any objection?
Well, I'm just looking to see.
I didn't pick a date. I'm just saying so that they can work on rescheduling it if there's a consensus, since we don't have a process to actually do this, except for workshops.
okay, we should probably go ahead and move it to a date certain then.
Yeah.
And so, August 6th is the,
It would have to be the 5th.
that's the commission meeting.
There's a budget.
August 13th?
I am not in,
Or
I am not in
20?
the state that entire week.
You're not in the state, so we can't move it to one to, we're playing Steel Peter, but what about the 12th?
Of August?
Yes. Does that work for the staff?
18th doesn't.
Fine by me.
Or the 13th, 12th or 13th?
Okay, on the 12th, we've got a code compliance board meeting and a Biscayne
Yes.
Park Foundation
Yeah, then
meeting
let's look at the
simultaneously that
13th.
night.
How about the 13th?
Tuesdays are the best. 13, 20.
That's
13th?
fine for me, the 13th.
I think the 13th will work.
Fine.
Are you're at Brickell? So that means we just have to give you time to get back here, correct?
Yeah, I wouldn't get back here to probably like 7:30-ish.
I mean, you'd also have to, were you planning on having the finance director there since it's a budget workshop? Do you want his availability if you're going to move it? Because
We're just doing tentative, yeah. The staff would have, the financial staff would have to be available, this wouldn't work.
So we can look at August 13th. I can,
But what do you want the 14th, I'm just sorry, 1 second. On the 14th, are you in Brickell still?
No.
Okay, would the 14th work for everybody, because that allows him not to be in Brickell?
Yes.
Yes, for me.
And that doesn't mess up with any of the other
Yeah,
budget.
that's fine with me.
no, we have the Public Art Advisory Board that night, but we can work around them, so.
Okay.
They are public art.
Yeah, I want
The
to make sure we're not going to push.
Yeah, after all the
Mr.
drama with the
Mr. Manager,
resolution.
the public art advisory board, they will be back only on September.
So they're not, there's
So
no
they don't
public...
have
event.
meetings on
There's no
August.
meeting.
No.
Okay, so the 14th would work for most folks at this point?
Yes.
Okay, so that would allow the accommodation for that. You're not going to be here on the meeting on the 6th? I'm not sure we can change that, just because of the complications of the... May I ask you a question? Are you available by phone if that would work for you, just to be available?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm actually going to be, I'm going to be in flight. At that point, I'm in
Yeah.
Milwaukee Monday and Tuesday instead.
That's okay, I just figured I'd ask.
I'm sorry.
That's okay, that's okay.
September 10th, September 20th.
So which gives us the whole month of August really for the budget workshop.
Okay. So are there any other comments before we adjourn? Village Clerk, you have some announcements? Go ahead.
Parks and Parkway Advisory Board, Thursday, July 25th, 2019, 7 p.m. Planning and Zoning Board, Monday, August 5th, 2019, at 6:30 p.m. The second workshop budget now has been moved. Our next regular commission meeting will be held on Tuesday, August 6th, 2019, 7 p.m.
Thank you. I just want to make one comment to thank, first of all, I thank the attorney for coming through a workshop. I know it's all legal workshop, but I appreciate you coming. I also want to appreciate Ms. Dillon and the Rosses for coming. But I also want to thank my colleagues in particular for working so collegially to make sure we can help with the village moving forward with things that are very necessary. And a shout out to Commissioner Tudor for bringing the item forward. Thank you, everyone. Motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
I second.
All those in favor?